So welcome everyone. On behalf of Naad Pargaas USA, I welcome you all to today's webinar on Punjab and agriculture. We are delighted to have our illustrious speakers today and audiences who have joined us from across various locales and time zones. Naad Pargaas is an organization dedicated to the effort of remaining consistently engaged in the conceptualization of Shabd philosophy. We delve into various domains, knowledge systems, and human faculties to bear on the process of hypothesizing and formulating our perspectives. Amongst the myriad of themes and practices that underpin the working of modern society and thereby feed a stream of existential concerns to the philosophical machinery to process, the subject of agriculture and sustainability remains germanely significant. Several factors, such as rapidly changing socio-economic factors, demographic preferences, government and policy support, continue to catapult this subject into mainstream imagination and interest. The topic of today's webinar, Punjab and Agriculture, aims to elicit perspectives from the academia, policymakers, and independent researchers on significance, opportunities, and challenges that apply to the domain of Punjab's agriculture. It is our sincere hope that the theoretical and academic research-based views and discourse that will be presented today will tickle ideation of potential future mechanisms that will overall positively contribute to this domain. With that, I'd like to mention that our speaker panel today consists of 5 speakers. We will have them express their thoughts on different aspects related to varied topics related with Punjabi agriculture. Amandeep Singh, our first speaker, is a director of Naad Pargaas USA. He will speak on the topic Unweaving Imaginations, Farming and Economics in Cultural Imagination and Policy Frameworks. Presently, I invite Amandeep to take the stage. Amandeep.
Thank you, Harjot, for this brief introduction. And I'm going to start real quick.
Amandeep, you may be on mute. We are not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I'm able to hear you. I don't know about others.
Okay.
I can hear you as well.
Yeah, okay. So probably she has her speaker a little low. So, okay. I'm going to start with this presentation, which I made specifically on unweaving imaginations, farming, and economics in cultural imagination and policy frameworks. So this overall, the topic is both a literary and philosophical, and also we're going to start with some kind of a backdrop of the existential concerns in which the farmers are actually going through. So the overall overview of this talk will consist of like 5 steps. At first step, I will be discussing the stagnations which are in agriculture as of today. Then we'll be discussing about I'll try to understand the challenges in the conceptual and the philosophical frameworks that are posing in agricultural domain. Later, I will be talking about understanding the power relations, specifically existential and metaphysical idea of farming. So how is existential farming and metaphysical idea of farming are intertwined, and how they are cajoling the imagination and aspirations of Punjabi and Punjab studies. And then we have realigning the farming policies according to what we have in agriculture. And finally, I will try to conclude my talk. So to start with the agriculture, there is a lot of talk about agriculture these days and agrarian reforms and farmer resistance in Punjab, and everything is going at the same time. So we are trying to delve into those stagnations. I've used the word actually stagnation when I'll try to come back to why I use the word stagnation here. So there is an increasing rural indebtedness, and then we have farmer protests, farmer suicides, and that poses a deplorable state of agriculture. So we have multiple studies also which are coming up around these issues, and when they include the studies by Dr. Jodhka himself, who is on the panel, that we have Preetham Singh, Sukhdev Singh Sohol, Pinder Singh Gandhi, and you have a lot of other scholars who have brought a lot kind of a greater view on this. And there is very recently a book was published in 2022 in December, which said which was a collection of essays by Shinder Singh Gandhi, and it had different scholars in it, including Ronki Ram and other scholars, Sukhpal Singh Sohol, Sukhdev Singh Sohol, Sukhpal Singh, and other scholars who have expressed their views in this book. The book is titled, it's been published by Routledge, and I think Dr. Jodhka also has an essay in the same book. So there is a lot of interest going on in the farmer conditions and the agricultural domain these days. So when we deep delve into the economics of this agricultural domain, we see that the GDP share of agriculture has remained stagnant from 2005 to 2019. So it's between 16 and 17% there, and despite the increases in wheat from and the MSP for wheat has gone from 570 to 1815 rupees, and then for rice also, it has gone up from 650 to 1925 in the same period. So if we look at that, the GDP has, even though the MSP has increased almost like 3 times, there is not much of growth in overall the farming sector. The farming sector is not, because it's not keeping up with the growth of the other sectors, which are growing at a probably much faster rate. So this is a kind of economic part of it, that the stagnation that I'm talking about. Then there are challenges in managing food surplus, which is also faced these days, especially by the government. And we have, I have pulled this data from Food Corporation of India's website. It says that 608 lakh million tons of food grain is there with FCI, while the requirement is only 210 on April 1. So they have different requirements based on different times of the year. So on April 1, they should have 210 lakh metric ton, but actually they have 608, which is almost like 3 times more food grain surplus that the government is holding. So this is basically a very complex situation, because if we have a high productivity of food grains, it challenges government for warehousing and transportation, while low productivity actually causes hardship on farmer itself. So it's a kind of imbalance, which it's a kind of something that needs a deeper thinking on it. So next is that this is a catch-22 situation with increasing MSP. As the MSP increases, it translates to like higher food prices, especially in the underdeveloped countries. So you cannot increase MSP too much, and then that will cause a food grain prices increase as well. So it's overall, if you look at this scenario, it comes to like a scenario, the situation is like that of an automobile, which is like stuck in a muddy water. And the more you try to accelerate it, its wheels are getting more clogged in that water. So we have to find out better solutions to figure out how can the policies be adjusted according to what the physical or the existential requirements of farmers are at the same time. We also see there is an increasing reliance on subsidies, grants, aids on fertilizers, power supplies, and purchase of final product. So there is increasing reliance on all these factors because the agricultural sector itself is not going uh, uh, not able to open up from its own inner potentialities. So then there is a conventional measures like MSP, which were adopted as an affirmative actions to enhance price stability and improve productivity. They have petrified with age, and that has sabotaged the crop diversity and causing ecological imbalances. And agricultural experts often keep talking about it, and especially Dr. Siddhara Singh Johal is also has written a lot about how to do better on MSP. How can we improve on that? Then we have the Green Revolution, which failed to provide socially equitable benefits. And landless laborers, peasants, and small farmers have remained elided from long-term benefits. So this is something that I believe is also a cause of concern. So the crisis is not only for agriculture itself, or just for the farming community. It's primarily, I believe, that when we look into things more closely, it's also a crisis of an intellectual exercise, a crisis of our understanding, a crisis of knowledge production, which is also which is elementary to all these, and to come out of this kind of stagnant position. To resolve this, we have and to take a greater look, we are having this webinar, and we are trying to go back to the basics and start from a blank state of mind. So I go back to very basic about farming to understand what is farming, what is farmer, and what is the philosophical underpinning going behind this. So in simple language, what is the logos of farming, or who is a farmer? So is farmer basically just a profession, or is it also a socially imaginable, and also having a lot of other factors besides just the professional part of it? So what are the material practices in the society that make a farmer to become a farmer? So this is I'm moving now to a more philosophical question, because that is where we will try to drive our answers and come back to understand how the policy framing can probably be adjusted according to that. So two questions that come to my mind and to start on this idea. The first is, does the idea of farmer have any historical genesis that gets possessed within the historical, socio-cultural, or traditional milieu? So this is the first question that I'm going to try to inquire into it. And then the second question that I'll also delve into is the being of a farmer, or understanding about this being, both historically disclosed and yet remains undisclosed. So this is what I'm going to try. Is the idea of being a farmer completely available to us when we just say the term farmer? So this is something that we need to look more closely. It may sound at this moment that we are going a little bit away, but this is something that we need to really dig back and go to the basics to understand what is it. So technically, a farmer is someone who undertakes agriculture for one's living. So this is something that we understand in our general terms. However, beyond technical definition, there are additional meanings associated with the idea of the farmer. So that are derived from the tradition, from culture, from social ethos. imaginations associated with the idea of the farmer. So this is beyond this. So the elementary, and this is a quote from Heidegger that I'm going to refer back. It says that the elemental historicity of Dasein may remain hidden from the Dasein himself. So what is the being of the farmer? So the historicity of the farmer or the Dasein, it remains hidden from the Dasein itself. So, and this is what we're trying to unveil and trying to discover ourselves. So only that part of the being, according to Heidegger, gets disclosed through tradition that is allowed to be transmitted and taken hold of in its own right. So this is how Heidegger would talk about a being. So what is the basic question of who is a farmer? So what is a farmer? So basically that's what needs to be disclosed further to go a little bit deeper in philosophical terms. So socio-culturally, the discourses around farming is in Punjab get disguised through the Biradari system. So that may or may not overlap completely with the technical definition. So technically, as I said, the farmer is only a person who is doing agriculture for his living. But socio-culturally, it's also driven through the Biradari system that may or may not overlap with the technical definition. And the gap between existential farming and metaphysical farming is always available through going with through this understanding. So, for example, there is a gap between the social status and the professional status of the series, who are actually the rural, the landless peasants, and all those people who are doing farming for generations, but yet they are not actually accounted to be a farmer in our common imagination. So what is the relationship between a farmer and farming? So once we try to understand the farmer in this wider context of social framing and cultural imagination and philosophical way, and then we try to understand what's the relationship between both of them. So there is something very interesting about farming in socio-cultural and political relationships of how farming is imagined in Punjab. So that we have to dig out and try to excavate our understanding through this. So farming is a complex domain which binds religious, economic, social, political, and psychological trains. So this is something that the complexity of farming becomes available to us. It holds a high value in Punjabi socio-political imagination. Paradoxically, a declining trend is also noticeable in professional employment in farming. So there is a kind of high values. People take pride in doing farming, but it's also a paradox that is available in professional employment in farming. And this paradox is available to us through this economic survey of Punjab of 2022 and 2023. Like the data is not is also showing some different trends which are emerging these days. So if you look at this data, the services sector is actually the biggest employer it holds the highest share of employment in Punjab. Of 42.43% of people are involved in the services sector, while the agriculture is only 25.75. So this economic survey of 2022 shows, in fact, at an India level, farming is at 45%. So, and this is something really interesting to note, that the overall the sector is more agriculture is more practiced at a national level, but in Punjab, it's the data is something a little bit showing a different trend. In fact, the dismay and the disenchantment with farming should be more in India, with the only 18.76% of the share in GVA, while the Punjab is at least better than at India level. So Punjab continues. This is also a statement which was mentioned in the Economic Survey of Punjab of 2022. It says that Punjab continues to be an agrarian economy, and exploratory analysis shows that agricultural sector plays an important role in driving growth in other sectors. So this statement is, I think, and this is half true, because right now more of it reflects a complete inertia of our way of relation with farming. So the complex narrative of Punjab economy is an inertia of the past, which particularly started after the Green Revolution. So this is complex narrative right here that needs some unweaving, and we need to look at things a little bit differently. So there is a psychology. So I'll come back to the philosophical question. So what is and I'm going to approach it from a sociological angle this time. So what is the philosophical binding with farming? So how does Punjabi imagination connects with farming? So I believe that there is a kind of double binding with farming in Punjab. Punjab has evolved much faster in economic sphere, while we notice a binding with farming in our traditional way of thinking. So there is a double binding of imagination and desire between farmer and farming. So how, and that double binding is reflected in farming holds a sense of traditional pride, a symbol of social honor and influence in cultural imagination of Punjab. So it has a high value there. But ironically, it also ushers a sense of destitute, depravity, economic hardship from a professional standpoint. So that is the way I use the word double binding. So it's like it has a sense of traditional pride which is associated with it, but at the same time, it also it's ironical to see that there is also the professional part standpoint. It's not a very enchanted profession. So, and in the essay, so when I try to go more closer to what I try to understand through this double binding is, so I went back to an essay by Tyler Doggett and Andy Egan, and the title of the essay says "Wanting Things You Don't Want." So this is how I think this essay actually discusses the beliefs, the desires, and imagination that shape how two kinds of human behavior are actually available to us. So Tyler and Andy discuss two behaviors in this essay that they have noted down. It's a very important, and I found it very useful, productive essay that can be really fruitful in understanding how Sikh imagination and Punjabi imagination actually relates with farming. So behavior one is like the role playing and the pretense, which is most of an imagination plus I desire. So they use a term I desire, which is different from regular desire. So they say that this is kind of the first kind of behavior that people develop when you want things that you don't want. And then behavior two is a serious behavior, which he says that there is a belief plus desire makes it together into a behavior two. So what differentiates the desire from I desire is to distinguish. It's distinguished by its functional role. What is the functional role of desire? That's how it distinguishes behavior one from behavior towards the desire from I desire. So, based on this study by Andy and Tyler, I come back to understanding farming. So, farming has social metaphysics of farming is something that I'll try to delve further into. So, there is a play of imagination and I desire, which is central to socio-cultural understanding of farming. The functional role of I desire is locatable in the social stature, reputation, and prestige associated with social cultural frameworks. So this is something really we can find it more relatable in farming one. So the power processes are stabilized with coded signs of understanding, marks of value and recognition, and encryption of social processes, and through obedience and differentiation in historical formation of being. So it's and I'm not disputing that the claim that there should be no no sense of pride taken in claim in understanding farming or relating with farming or doing farming. In fact, everybody who does follows a profession takes some pride in the profession that they follow. Doctor will take some pride in being a doctor, and similarly, similarly, farmer has takes more pride in the profession that has been taken. So the power relations get internalized through traditional customs, and these are as if these are natural to one's free will. So this is something more. I'm talking more from a Foucauldian perspective. So I'm going to go back to Foucault's understanding about power as well in this. So social relationships, they get internalized by binding farming into a biradari system. This is how Punjabi relation with farming is. The idea of farming gets hegemonized in a certain way and monopolized into the biradari, despite diverse types of the biradaris practicing farming. So this is something which is easily noticeable in Punjabi relationship with farming. So according to Foucault, he uses the term called pastoral power. Pastoral power is a form of power that cannot be exercised without knowing the inside of people's mind. He actually gives four different ways in which pastoral powers is practiced, and this is one of those ways because the word he uses, pastoral power, it's been derived from medieval understanding, and that has actually transcended into the modern understanding as well. So that way of relationship with power, while understanding that under the power dynamics, he says that it's a form of power that cannot be exercised without knowing the inside of people's mind. It implies a knowledge of conscience and ability to direct it. So that is how Foucault would understand the relationships with power. So this results in idealization of what I call a feudal consciousness, which is imbibed through what Foucault calls deep-rooted social nexus, delving into both individualizing and totalizing a form of power. So it's this is how we relate with power. So pastoral power continues to influence diasporic imagination as well. So we see investment in rural properties and agricultural farms by diasporic communities that produce paradoxical aspirations among the youth of Punjab. And this is causing widespread exodus of Punjabi youth from Punjab who's aspiring for a wobble of pastoral power to a detour. So this is how we see more of investments coming in from diasporic communities into rural properties and rural areas. So that this is just the existential part of farming, how farming actually relates in existential concerns of farming, which are always there. So the existential farming and spiritual farming, the other way of relation with farming is also through the spiritual metaphysics. So those farmings are those two types of relationship with farming has to be segregated in order to further understand the role of farming. So spiritual value of farming ushers interplay between mind, nature, and higher power. So this is why Andy and Tyler call this a serious behavior. So when we relate it in terms of farming, it actually invokes a spiritual value of farming, which is interplay between the mind, nature, and higher power. Then it modulates in defining the meta-ethics of farming. So how does meta-ethics of farming operates in our understanding? So it produces a serious behavior and sensitivity towards nature. So the spiritual understanding actually produces that sensitivity towards nature, and it defines the Sikh relationship with farming with the Guru Nanak Sahib's settlement at Kartarpur while sharing farm produce with the Sangat. So this is how Sikhs relate with the farming, and its spiritual meanings are actually deeply derived from this. So the spiritual metaphysics of farming is important for fostering the ecological it's important for fostering the ecological diversity, and it also helps to promote sensitivity towards exploitation of natural resources. We cannot just go blindly on exploiting the natural resources only for productive measures and capitalistic gains. And development of ecosystems is also something that spiritual metaphysics can really help bind or bridge the gaps between and development of ecosystems, and cultivating a cultural sense of wonder, and which is it helps to actually cultivate a culture itself. So spiritual until we relate with that, the folklore, the celebration of Kudrat, the sense of wonder, etc., and all those are important aspects of Punjab or Sikh relationship with farming. So there is a creative experience of life as well, which continues to engage or continues to come back while we relate with farming. So overall, it is central to promote serious behavior towards farming. So this is how I would say farming can actually be. So, is there and can the policy frameworks actually bind the existential farming with spiritual metaphysics of farming? This is something that we need to really think about. And so, the real question about how does the policy frameworks actually come close to understanding the real value or the spiritual meaning of farming? So we need to revisit our blanket agricultural policy. I think this is very much possible if we relate to come out of the stagnations in farming, and to come out that we have to drive our policy frameworks in a more broader sense. So for which we need to actually revisit our blanket agricultural policy that continues to over live for now. when all the other domains are going further into diving into their deeper studies, farming has only one kind of agricultural policy, especially in Punjab, which is probably something that needs to be revisited. So, do all large farmers, small farmers, and landless peasants need free power? We need to think about this a little bit more. Do all farmers need one policy for all types of subsidies? For example, can we have easy loans and crop insurance and fertilizer subsidies for small and medium farmers? And we can have horticulture and timber market subsidies and insurance for large size farmers. So if the policy itself gets more closer to the social understanding or the economics of farming, we can actually figure out how to frame it a little bit better than and come up with better solutions for overall development of the sector. Can the formulas of reverse subsidy be devised or designed to save water and power resources and crop diversification? This is something that I think we need to think. Reverse subsidies could be like you get paid after rather than paying before. So it is it's a view by many of the experts that I have followed and listened to. They say that it's a kind of myopic to vision that the redemption of agriculture can be done from within agriculture itself. So industrialization of farming with the investment in packaging units can be undertaken. So it's really important that farming sector gets closer to industry. So industrialization is a very central part that we have to look into it. So for industrialization, we can have packaging units that can be developed. Then flour mills can be going closer, and rural warehousing can be undertaken, silos can be put down, and then we can also have polishing units. This can encourage investment in industry, in rural industry as well, which is modern rural industry. We can also have cold storages, greenhouses, and through rural cooperative societies, and this is something that can easily be done. If we for example, if we do not have a packaging unit or a cold storage near the farm, the food, the produce itself gets perished. So there is not much of shelf life there. So we need to think about how more industries can be flourished, brought up in here. So evolving MSP regulations from food grain deficient past, we need to actually come out of that mindset that the MSP regulations are for only for cereals like wheat and rice. We can also include more of MSP on pulses and oil seeds, and the policies can be adjusted according to that framework. So we have to integrate farming with the market by using advanced tools of information technology. So these days we have lots of forecasting tools which are available in IT industry to estimate about the upcoming shortages or excesses. And this can really help in realigning the cultivation process. What are we going to sow for the next season can be determined based on the forecasting tools that IT industry can really help in bridging the gap between between the market and the farm. So that new websites and government can actually facilitate that through development of mobile apps as well. So large-scale adoption of alternate sources of energy is also required. How about using wind power, solar power, alternative fuels for can be developed from byproducts of farms. So this will actually require by developing farming plus sector. This is what I term as farming plus sector. We can, for example, we can have waste management, compost management, biodegradable packaging materials from farm byproducts. So it's something very interesting that whatever byproducts we get from farm, it's only put to burning in Punjab, but we can actually, instead of doing that, we can really do something more productive with that byproduct. So biodegradable packagings could be developed, and then commercial plantations can also be undertaken. Like nowadays, with more urbanization in farm in Punjab as well as overall in India, there is a greater demand for floriculture, decorative trees and plants. So these things can also be developed. Then flour milling can be also undertaken near the farms, which can blend different types of flours. So this is also another activity that can be taken up. Nurseries for urban terrace gardens can also be undertaken. Seed production is an important aspect too. We are not most of the seeds. We have agricultural experts here with us, but they will be able to probably shine some more light on it. But I believe that seed production in Punjab is not actually happening within Punjab. It's more of it. It is coming from other parts of India. So then there can be spice production too, which can be undertaken here, integrating with the timber and the furniture industry. This is with more urbanization. These are a few more areas that can be easily explored with the farming plus sector. Then to undertake this, we also need some education and uplifting the technological and educational status of Punjabi youth. So for landscape development, we need that we can have some vocational courses which can help in increasing the technical capacity, technical understanding and education of our youth. And landscape development can be taken up, cane furniture, and from bamboo cultivation can also be helpful in that. And then we have decorative material from farm produce. Training in machinery and equipment can also be undertaken at rural area in rural spaces. Timber and handicraft products, space management, and kitchen gardening trainings can also be undertaken there. This doesn't take too much of the space too, but it can actually be very motivational for and create some employment there too. So afforestation drives can also be undertaken, and especially in the panchayat lands. And we can also have wells and ponds. It's something very interesting to note that wells and ponds used to be a very essential part of Punjab landscape, Punjab spaces. But this since we have less of wells and ponds these days, it has actually also caused a loss in the water table has actually gone down dramatically. To reach habitat, we can develop this, and this will also produce temporary, at least some good source of employment to the rural youth through all these measures that if are included in the policy frameworks. So I will quickly conclude now. I'm getting a message that we need to pass. So we need to, I use the term, undertake responsible agriculture. So that would require us intensified intellectual rigor, which needs to be reproduced. So after the Green Revolution, or even before that, there is more focus on only cereal production, especially wheat and rice. but we need to actually develop more varieties in other cereals, pulses, oil seeds, and all those, which can actually enhance the productivity of those crops as well. So policy framework with the short can be divided into like short-term and long-term visions. So right now, with only we're focusing on the immediate concerns, while there is less focus on the long-term vision of how to develop it into an industry to make it more progressive and more economically sustainable and um, productive in that sense. So ecological reclamations are also required. Productivity and social progress is since that important part of it. So to do all this, I think there is the question of being, returning back to Heidegger's point, the question of being has to be re-understood, and thus there is need for a self-reclamation from our feudal consciousness. So nature, it's natural to take pride in occupation, but unkind and even inhuman to consolidate a profession into social hierarchies and power structures through its monopolization into a brotherly and other forms of genealogical inheritance. So this is something, and I'm not using a Western constructs of humanism in here. I'm just appealing. I'm just saying that this is something that more important in our imagination to re-evolve in terms of farming. So we need to redeem agriculture from raw politics of pastoral power as well. So this is something that agriculture has to be saved from. And then this is my last point. I would, and kind of last word that I would want to say is integrations, which would be integration of industrial, educational, social, and individual or personal. So these are, I think, this is my last submission. I would end with that.
Thank you, Amandeep. Amandeep made a spectrum of observations which were hinged in a rich analysis of the topic at hand. He calls for the formulation of the paradigm of responsible agriculture. Some of his observations note foremost he observes that maybe the crisis of intellectualization may be at the helm of the challenges that the agricultural sector is facing today, such as the over-reliance on fertilizers and farming products, and the GDP of the agriculture sector remaining stagnant, challenges in managing food grain supply overage, and the issues of social equitability. He delved into the logos of farming, into what it means to be a farmer, and he raised a few probing questions which will encourage us to excavate or unveil the being of a farmer. Also, what's the gap between the metaphysical idea of farming and its social, cultural, real context? He notes that there is a paradox between the pride that Punjabis associate with farming vis-a-vis the number of Punjabis that are employed in agricultural sector vis-a-vis the other sectors. And he made some observations regarding the power relation internalization by referencing the import of focus theories, honing in on the pastoral power concept, and opining that there is onslaught of idealization of feudalization in the mindset. He called for recognizing the distinction between existential farming and the metaphysical and spiritual import of farming, wherein the latter ushers a natural sensitivity towards nature and the need for ecological balancing and mandate, and it cultivates a sense of wonder. And at the end, he actually calls for a need for the short-term and long-term policy framework reimagination to aid in the realization of the metaphysical significance of Punjab's agriculture. He suggested some potential considerations and methods to implement the next generation solutions in the sector to foster long-term sustainability of the sector. Amandeep, thank you for your rich, detailed talk. With that, we will now move on to the next section of our webinar. Dr. Rupanjali Karthik is an officer in the Indian Administrative Services and is presently the Special Secretary in Science, Technology, and Environment sectors. She holds the charge of Special Secretary in Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare. Gurpreet Singh serves as an agricultural officer in the Department of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare, Government of Punjab. He's an expert in the field of agricultural extension services and serves as an advisor in the field. I call upon Dr. Rupanjali and Gurpreet to present their talk on the topic Sustainability and Development in Agricultural Practices of Punjab. Dr. Rupanjali and Gurpreet.
Thank you so much. I would just like to share the screen. Good morning, good evening, everyone. I thank Naad Pargaas for giving this great opportunity to me and Shri Gurpreet Singh for presenting our views today here. And also at the outset, I would like to say that the views which we are going to share in this presentation are purely personal, though we are working in the government of Punjab, Department of Agriculture, but the views are personal and they do not reflect in any way what the state policies are presently. With this, I would just give an overview of the presentation. We'll go through a broad understanding of what sustainability and sustainable agriculture is in general, and then how it looks like in context of Punjab. We're keeping it very high level just for the key areas of concern and a couple of areas which we think are emerging and we need to give a little more emphasis on that. And lastly, we go for what kind of interventions we think are could be suitable to help address these problems from the perspective of an agricultural practitioner, which is Shri Gurpreet Singh, and from the perspective of a research and a policy maker, in which I will chip in again. So if we see sustainability, and I think the definition of sustainability goes back to the United Nations Commission in 1987, which emphasizes on how the present generation should not compromise the use of existing natural resources so that the future generations are equally able to enjoy them. And if we see, there's a Government of India National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. It talks about 10 key points which could make agriculture sustainable. It talks about water efficiency, improving the farm practices, improving, providing credit support, markets, and livelihood diversification, to say a few. And also, if we see an example of US Department, it talks about we need to protect environment when we are doing agriculture, and we need to make the best use of the non-renewable energy sources. So here I would like to say, when I was going through all these definitions, I was reminded of what Gurbani talks about. It says, Pavan Guru Pani Pita Mata Tat Mahat. And I feel that this is the essence of sustainability, which is very much available in the scriptures. And so sustainability and sustainable agriculture in that true spirit is not new to Punjab and Punjabis. I think it's very much there in the culture and in the scriptures as well. However, I think there is a gap in whether we are living and whether we are respecting these values or not. So if we see the three things, stubble burning is impacting negatively the pavan, and the paddy cultivation is reducing the groundwater level, which is pani. And overall, indiscriminate use of chemical fertilizers is actually negatively impacting the tarat. So in a very simple way, if you go back, Gurbani gives a very concrete, a way of how sustainability and sustainable agriculture should look like, that we need to respect these natural resources. So with this, these are the three broad pillars of sustainability when we talk about is environment, its economy, its society. And if we see in the context of Punjab, especially if we take an example of environment, as I just shared, that our air, our water, our earth, they are being negatively impacted. So it's highly unsustainable. If we see the economy, as Amandeep ji in his presentation did talk about stagnation in agriculture, and in the coming slides, I would also share how the agriculture productivity overall is going down. And the third is society. So overall, the impact of, if we are so unsustainable in our agriculture practices, how negatively it's going to impact the society is not a thing that we need to really imagine, because with this kind of unsustainability, I think there are a lot of issues which are coming of people's health, because a lot of pollution is there. And then there are impacts of equity. We are not sure whether we'll be able to provide those basic environmental rights to the people of Punjab. So I think if we see the three pillars of sustainability, Punjab is on a path which is definitely very unsustainable. Now, just giving some couple of examples at a very high level of how these agricultural practices and Punjab's overall economy looks like when we see from agriculture. And again, as Amandeep very beautifully gave a lot of details about the percentage of employment sector-wise. So in this, it's a very high level in which, if you see from 1971 onwards, Punjab's agricultural GDP is showing a decline, whereas in India, there's an improvement. And so again, there's a question mark on whatever we are doing from close to 4 decades, there is a need to surely revisit them, because it is not sustainable, as we said earlier, environmentally, but it's also not sustainable economically. This is another slide which is a very important one to share. And if you see this red picture, where it's close to, out of 138 assessment units in Punjab, only 22, which is 16%, are safe, and 5 units, which is 4%, are semi-critical. Remaining 111, which is 80%, are critical and overexploited. And since 2011, more than 40 units have exceeded the groundwater development greater than 200%, and a few even exceeding 400%. So these figures are alarming. This kind of a map of Punjab is not something any Punjabi would be really proud of. And that is why I thought that it's very important for the audience which is there with us to understand the gravity of the situation. And so this is not the kind of future we would like to give to the coming generations. So we go forward for next key issues, in which I would request Shri Gurpreet Singh ji to take it forward, and then I will chip towards the end. Gurpreet ji, over to you. Gurpreet ji, you are on silent. You need to.
Am I audible? Thanks, Dr. Panjali, for we are discussing the sustainable issues of the Punjab agriculture practices. As you see, the slide area under the wheat and the paddy crops is very high in the Punjab. MSP and the assured procurements for the wheat and paddy has led the farmers to go monoculture of the wheat and paddy. The number of crops sown in the Punjab was 21 in the year 1960 and 61, and declined to 9. Paddy was not a traditional crop of the state, but due to the national food security needs of the country, the government framed the policies which favored and encouraged the paddy cultivation in our state. Monocropping of the wheat and the paddy has put a negative impacts on the agriculture of the Punjab, as you are discussing earlier. Overproductivity of the paddy and the wheat cycle is 12 ton per hectare, has caused a mining of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash and micronutrient of our soil. The agriculture scientists and the researchers have frequently expressed a deep concern over reduction in the crop diversity, and has potentially triggered a looming ecological and environmental disaster. The situation is further aggravated by the stubble whirling, as we have discussed earlier in the previous Dr. Sardar Amandeep Singh and Dr. Panjali. Due to this, there is a negligible growth in the food grain productivity in the Punjab in the last decade, as compared to other Indian states. The increasing yield of the food grains in the state, other than the Punjab and Haryana, signal the self-sufficiency in the individual states in terms of their food grain requirements. This increasing productivity exerts an increasing pressure on the state treasury to purchase the grains that are only being added to the top existing stockpiles, and oftentimes rotting in the warehouse facilities. As earlier discussed by Amandeep Singh in the previous lecture, on the April 1st, 2021, the food grain buffer stock is center pool was 3.5 times more than the established norms. Similarly, next slide is can we go to the next slide, please? Similarly, the slide shows the overusing chemical fertilizers. High dose of the fertilizer is the gateway of all the problem. The picture shows that the indiscriminate use of the fertilizer is being done in Punjab as compared to the India, because the indiscriminate fertilizers, urea and DAP, are made the crops more vulnerable to the pests, diseases, but also polluted the groundwater and the soil structure. Both fertilizers, urea and DAP, are made available to the farmers on the subsidy. There is a subsidy of more than 80% on the urea and more than 60% on the diammonium phosphate. More urea application, more irrigations are required. Crop will be vulnerable to the insects, pests, and diseases as compared to required fertilization. Can we move to the next one? As we see the slide regarding the emerging areas of the concern. The most emerging areas of the concern is that topographical changes. That is always been ignored by our state government, because no doubt the laser leveler has significantly reduced the water losses in the irrigation, and it made the surface fit for the flood irrigation. Now it's been practiced, so by doing so, the topography of our soil is lost. Soil previously fit for the pulses and the oil seeds are now made to fit for paddy cultivation. So the puddling techniques in the paddy cultivation has put a hard surface in the earth, so the recharging of the groundwater become very difficult. That's why we are showing the situation of the Punjab with the red zone. We are in a red zone, and it's in a hard pan surface. This time there is a more lodging of the wheat and more loss of the wheat crops has been seen due to the heavy rains this year. When we talk about the alternative crops, most important area of concern is the availability of good seeds. Hybrid seed availability for the alternative crop for the wheat and paddy for the diversification mostly produced by the private sectors. So R&D for the production of the hybrid seeds at the government institution should be established, because private sectors is charging very heavy prices from the farmers, and every year they have to purchase the seeds from the private companies. Like BT cotton seeds are developed in the southern states, but tested in very short window in our state. So these varieties are more vulnerable to the pest attacks and the diseases. The chances of the failure are very high. As we see in the last year, the cotton crop was lost because of the white fly attack. On the other hand, POU developed varieties of the cotton varieties are not cultivated in the Punjab. If the BT gene is introduced in the local varieties, in the local POU varieties, that will be more suitable for Punjab agriculture. Similarly, maize, pulses, oil seeds are to be taken on the account. Can you move to the next slide? We have just observed there is a lots of gap in the sustainability issues in the context of Punjab agricultural practices. Therefore, we propose set of potential interventions to address the same. As we see the slide, there are lots of gaps have been shown in our sustainable agriculture in the Punjab. As we see the slide, there is the inefficient use of the water in the Punjab has put more area under the red zone. Only 1.2% land under the micro irrigation for less than 20% in the Karnataka and 15% in the Tamil Nadu. Moreover, the quality of the irrigation water is deteriorating by the indiscriminate use of the fertilizers and the pesticides. Moreover, the traces of the heavy metals like arsenic, uranium has posed a threat to the mankind. So there is a great need for the efficient use of the water. The Punjab is facing a imminent underground water depletion crisis. So we propose underground pipelines, as we see the slide, drip irrigation, sprinkle irrigation system for irrigation in this way. Water saving efficiency will be improved up to 70%, and the fertilizer use efficiency will be reduced up to 30 to 60%. More funds are to be allocated to putting up to the underground pipeline system, drip and sprinkler system, and the rainwater harvesting systems to improve the irrigation water use efficiency. The next gap, as we see in the slide, is the lack of crop diversification. That is the need of the hour, as we already discussed about the negative impacts of the monoculture of the wheat and paddy on the Punjab agriculture. The crop rotation and diversification can be the potential solution for the sustainable agriculture. State government has focused 2 crops this year, like cotton and basmati, but it is well established fact that the legume crops improve the soil fertility by fixing 40 to 60 kilogram per hectare and atmospheric nitrogen. This improves the soil health that requires few fertilization, save natural sources like water. The pulses cultivation saves 90% of the ground for 90% of the water. So we propose 3 cropping cycle like sarson, moong, arhar, or we can go for potato seed, moong, groundnut. In the districts like Sangrur, Barnala, Moga, Ludhiana, and where the cotton is low cotton districts. And for this we have to map this procurement system with the Markford initially is requirement for doing so. For procuring pulses, we require 1/5 space as compared to the cereals. So the expenditure for the procurement, transportation cost may be reduced to 1/5. That funds can be utilized to provide benefit to the farmer in form of the MSP. And according to the provisional estimates of the latest published by the Director General of the Commercial Intelligence and the Statistics, Indian import of the pulses was valued about approximately 28,000 crores, and those of the oilseed valued approximately rupees 400 crores. Punjab could help in saving 600 crores import value of the pulses and 5,000 crores of the oil seeds by 2027. For promoting pulses, subsidy can be provided linked with the electricity saving to fertilizer saving and addition in the soil to pulses growing farmers. Leguminous crops like the pigeon pea, arhar, as we have earlier discussing on the slides, mung bean, chickpea, which requires less water, like 1 to 3 irrigation, as compared to the rice, which requires 25 to 30 irrigations, and the wheat 4 to 5 irrigation seems to be suitable and viable alternative for the crops. In this way, we can save water for the future generation. As we see the slide from the creation of the scientific storage facilities, processing plant, and the dal mills through the cooperative societies, as earlier discussed by the earlier speaker, Sardar Amandeep Singh Ji, for the farmers is needed. The farmers can store, process their own produce at reasonable cost, and finally sell the produce directly to the consumer to earn higher benefits. As we see the slide, another potential crop is the groundnut. The cultivation of the groundnut will help in conserving the valuable water sources, reducing pesticide and improving soil fertility of the Punjab. So the crop diversification we need established post-harvest handling, storage, processing, value addition technologies of the groundnut and its products in the state. In the light of diversification and development of the niche area under the groundnut, development of the mechanized cleaning, grading, drying, decortication, extraction of the oil, suitable packaging, and storage of the groundnut and its product is essential. Development of the confectionery products like groundnut varieties for the higher returns. Development of short duration varieties for the spring season. Collar rot resistant varieties for value addition. High oleate groundnut genotypes and a few confectionery purpose strains have been found promising for the spring-summer season. Agroforestry can can be a potential in the crop diversification of agriculture of the Punjab. We propose contract farming consortium model between the farmers, industry, banking, and insurance support implemented in the Punjab. Department of Agriculture and Department of Forestry to work together across the production and the trade, reviving the setting up of the mandis and the timber, as earlier discussed by the earlier speaker, is the need of the hour. Next gap we're going to discuss over here is the overuse of the chemical fertilizers. As we see, the overuse of the chemical fertilizers has made a crop more susceptible to the pests and diseases attack. So higher use of the pesticide in the state, we propose cultivation of leguminous crops and oilseed crops. This requires less fertilizers. Government of India is introducing soluble fertilizers like nitrogen, phosphorus, zinc under the subsidy in order to encourage the use. The soluble fertilizers surely have higher fertilizer use efficiency than the solid fertilizers. Liquid fertilizer usage with the drip and sprinkle irrigation will save 30 to 60% of the fertilizers. The subsidy policy on the fertilizer need to be differently regulated to avoid the spill. Government of India is planning shift toward the direct benefit transfer and the regional target procurement PDS system, or the planned shift toward the per acreage fertilizer subsidy is the need of the hour. Next gap, if we see the slide over here, is the topographical changes. Only those farming techniques are to be promoted which do not disturb the topography. Subsidy for the micro irrigation techniques are to be promoted. The next gap, if we see here, is the seed, research and development, and quality control. When we talk about the alternative crops, but the seeds availability and research and development and good quality seed is a big gap in the implementation of the crop diversification plan. For making seeds availability, we need to strengthen seed farms. Seed farms for the alternative crops to provide healthy, disease-free, and quality seeds and seedlings with the establishment of the required infrastructure and construction of the farm machinery and the equipment, construction of and repairing and the threshing floors. And research and development, alternative crops, cotton, maize, pulses, oilseed, and millets find limited space in our research institution, because we are regularly doing research on the wheat and paddy, and we are developing the techniques to good quality seeds of only wheat and paddy. Main emphasis is being laid on the wheat and paddy for monocropping. This should be the focus on alternative crops. For enhancing the productivity of the pulses and the oilseed should also be focused. Seed production of a high value crop should be focused. Synchronous maturity varieties of the pulses and the oilseed are to be produced. There should be a convergence among the research institution for production of high yielding variety seeds for the better growth, and establishment of the seed processing plants, seed processing machinery, seed storage facilities are to be established in our state. We are not able to get good quality of seeds, seedlings, and nurseries and the plants. So for the draft seed bill was prepared in the 2019, which is still lying pending in the Parliament, Government of India. For getting a good quality of seeds, we need to implement this seed bill draft 2090, which is lying pending in the Parliament. It should be implemented for the welfare of the farming. Now I would like to request my colleague, Dr. Rupanjali Karthik, to present the next slide, please.
Thank you, Gurpreet. So I'll just share a couple of gaps and recommendations. This is purely from the lens of a researcher based on my doctoral work and as a policymaker with close to 15 years of experience at the state level. One of the key gaps is that there is very limited monitoring and evaluation of policies and laws per se. So there are a lot of projects in the agriculture department, which are monitored and evaluated. But this kind of monitoring and evaluation for the policy impact, for the impact of law, that what were the objectives with which it was created and whether we have fulfilled them, yes, no, maybe. This is one of the core gaps which is seen in agriculture. For example, as Gurpiji talked about the laser levelers, now introducing this machinery across the state by providing subsidy was definitely a policy intervention. But there's also a need to understand that when a policy or interventions are implemented, what have been the intended and the unintended consequences of those steps. So I think this is one very important case where laser leveling definitely has reduced the, it has improved the water efficiency, but also it has increased the susceptibility of crops for lodging. In a very recent heavy rains which struck the state in like a month back, the lodging of crops was seen more in the areas where there was laser leveling done than in others. And there was a research note put up by the PAU in this regard. So I think these are those sectors which need a little more understanding and research and going into the depth of how we can address them. And similarly, another example where there's a limited monitoring and evaluation is on the fertilizer subsidy. Now, with almost 80% and 60% respectively subsidies given on urea and the DAP, so we are encouraging people to make excessive use of it, right? But we are not understanding, or maybe in the policy, we're not evaluating the impact on soil. We all maybe know in discussions, but it never comes as a negative impact of the policy. So I think this is another example to share that monitoring and evaluation of agriculture policies, different policy interventions, definitely a must. And second thing is we have a lot of data in agriculture sector, but when we are making policies, making laws, that use of data to inform the policy or to update the policy is very, very, I would say, done in a very limited cases. So there is a need to, one, publish the data which we have, update that data and make use of that data when we're making a law or a policy. Second gap which I want to highlight is on the outdated policies, as Amandeep ji in his presentation also talked about. Now, for example, we have moved from the era of food scarcity to food for being food surplus. So at the time when Green Revolution was introduced and MSP procurement policy was introduced, like close to 5 decades back, there was a reason for that. We were, a famine hit country, and we definitely needed to support and, provide, introduce the high yielding variety crops. So that was all done with the right purpose. Now, but this is the time when there are a lot of other states where the production of wheat, paddy is growing so much. And now the grains are rotting in the FCI godowns. So this another is an indicator that the policies that we have hinged upon since more than 4 or 5 decades need to get revised as the situation has changed. And similarly, another example is on the power subsidy. Now, power subsidy is given and the negative impact is happening on the free use of power, leading to a negative overuse of water and the depleting groundwater level. So this, again, we need to see that, as Amadit, you talked about, that we need to have a differentiated policy. Do all the farmers need free subsidy? Talking to a lot of farmers, in the fields, many of them say that, look, we do not want free power. We want assured power. You take X amount of reasonable tariff from us, we are happy to give it. But yes, there are people who may not be able to afford it. But that differentiated application of subsidy is also a need of the hour, and we need to revise these kind of policies. Another example is of the laws. So groundwater rights and land ownership is a very tricky situation if we see from the government of India, like at a national level. So all the rights of groundwater are never talked about rights per se. There's always linked to the ownership of land, which practically means a person who owns a land can extract as much amount of water as he or she wants, but a person with no land, where he or she would go to? So what about the viability of his groundwater rights? And also, if we see the latest Supreme Court judgments in which right to water is a fundamental right. Now, how do you give right to a person who's poor, who's landless, and right to water as a basic fundamental right? So there are a lot of questions which, as policy people, we need to understand and put our minds into it and see that where do we need to update the laws? Where do we need to reflect the legal developments and the other developments happening across the domain? Third gap, which I want to highlight, is the impact of policies of multiple agencies, as I earlier shared, and which is like an open secret, that the Department of Agriculture subsidy policy on providing, high-yielding crops, the water-intensive crop, for example, paddy, the Department of Power subsidy on electricity. Now, these two are negatively impacting the groundwater levels. But in this slide, these three departments, These three are different departments, but the impact is happening on a third department called the groundwater. So when we are reviewing the policy, one, of course, we're not reviewing the policy in the way we should, but if we start doing it, we also need not do it in a very siloed way. We need to come together and identify what are the policies which are impacting one another. They could be drafted by different agencies, but they need to come together and see what are the impacts of their policies on each other. Forget about the policy impact on its own objectives. So these are also very crucial interventions that we need to do, and that has to be done at a macro level, cutting across the silos of different agencies. And the last is about the insufficient public consultation. So this is on the basis of the research as well as my experience in the government, though there are some positive trends, which I will share towards the end, that public consultation till date, whether at the national level or at the state level, is not a mandate. There is no law which mandates it. Yes, as a matter of practice, some agencies do, some agencies do not. But I believe that in this century, if we are talking about lawmaking and policy making, and public consultation is an option, this is not a good thing. I think we need to mandate such basic things, because if you are asking public, they are the ones who are going to get impacted by the laws and policies framed. Yes, there is a good understanding that the people's representatives are good enough to showcase what the people want, definitely. But I think with changing times, we need to take another step of involving people directly in lawmaking process. And so we need to mandate, so this is my suggestion or recommendation, that we need to mandate the pre-legislative consultation. And second thing I would like to say is also that we need perhaps if we see agriculture sector of Punjab, which is, there are a lot of issues, a lot of socio-economic environment issues entrenched with each other. So maybe I think we need to come up with something like negotiated lawmaking. We need to experiment with this concept. Some examples have happened in the US in some sectors. So in this, what happens, negotiated lawmaking, the stakeholders, the right holders who are going to get impacted by the rule or by the policy, they come up with the draft. They come up with what the law looks like to them. Once they thrash out those details, they give it to the agency, and the agency takes it forward from there. I think it's very important, considering the agitation that we saw for farmer ordinances. It's very important to take farmers and all the right holders on board. And it's very important to understand what is their perspective. If you see the groundwater situation, such kind of an alarming thing definitely indicates that we need to have some intervention. We cannot say we don't need to regulate it. But how do we regulate? I think if we take stakeholders on board, take them, the primary people, to steer the drafting with the help of a lot of experts, that could be a very good way, because then there's a lot of buy-in from the people who are going to get impacted by the law that they want to get implemented by. So these are the broad things. And yes, which I said that I'll come towards the end about the positive thing. The example of Punjab's agriculture policy, which is presently being, it's at a draft stage in presently. So very good mechanism has been set up where an expert group has been made, where people who are having expertise in agriculture, they are the core members of the committee, close to maybe 10 members committee has been notified. And they are doing consultations with the farmers. So they're visiting almost every district, talking to them and understanding what are the concerns, what is the problem like, and also trying to understand what kind of things you can expect us to provide as a relief when the policy is drafted. This is, I think, a very, very good step. Second thing is they're also talking to different agencies, for example, transport department, urban local bodies, so power. So there are different water resources. So they are talking to the officers of different departments, and they're having detailed discussions, like the marathon meetings that go from morning till evening, in which they're again talking about what are the issues that are impacting agriculture in your department look like. So I think this kind of thinking is very good to start with. And we are still at the draft stage. And I really hope that, especially the public consultation part, and also understanding that where the old policies need to be reviewed, that is something being on a positive pedestal in the state presently. And I really hope that all these come to a conclusion in a very positive and a very holistic agriculture policy for the state of Punjab. With this, I close my presentation, and thank you once again for giving this opportunity to me and Gurpreet.
Dr. Rupanjali, Karthik, and Gurpreet Singh, they gave a a very strong ground level record and, details in the state of Punjab agriculture, at the grassroots levels. They talked about the challenges and gaps and deficiencies in Punjab's agricultural practices. They stated them adequately, and they provided some powerful recommendations to the lawmakers and the policymakers, as well as Dr. Rupanjali at the end left us on a positive note, stating that the expert group is actually talking to the farmers and getting their input to have a bearing on the definition of the policy. I noted that they were, in terms of the Dr. Gurpreet Singh, for instance, he bemoaned the deficiencies and abnormalities in Punjab's agricultural practices, where the area under wheat and paddy is overtly significant. Monoculture has really had some dire consequences, and there's been indiscriminate use of fertilizers that's caused damage to the levels of water levels, and that has changed the soil topography, and there's loss of soil topography because of the overcultivation and the monocultivation. He calls for an action to provide the high quality seeds to the farmers, because those are presently in the purview of the private sector, and they charge hefty amount to the farmers, which farmers are not able to afford. So that was an important call of action that I believe Dr. Gurpreet Singh made. And he also observed that there is inefficient use of water in the sector, and suggested some potential means to advance responsible irrigation practices. And then suggested patterns of farming that are based on rotating crops across different seasons based on their inherent characteristics. The leguminous plants have certain characteristics versus the non-leguminous. So he suggested the mix there. Dr. Rupanjali noted some additional gaps and recommendations underpinning the need for sustainable monitoring and evaluation of agricultural policies as well, because having the data is one thing. Coming up with a policy which listens to the heartbeat of the data is another thing. Yet monitoring how effective those policies is another thing, and is very paramount. So I believe she made a strong ask for having those monitoring and evaluation methods in place. And the other one was, where the 5 decades ago, the food scarcity was a grappling problem that we had in India, versus present day we have food surplus. So, the current time calls for a revised policy as the landscape has changed. And, and then as I was mentioning that it's very heartening to note that, there are expert groups that are reaching out to farmers to understand their needs and challenges, and really having them at the helm of affairs, and having them prototype and draft a policy which the policymakers can then review for adequacy and efficiency. And this kind of, I think she also noticed that she noted that negotiated lawmaking is sort of coming at the forefront in the Western world as well. So it's made its inroads into India. That's very encouraging and heartening to note. Thank you again, Dr. Gurpreet Singh and Dr. Rupanjali Karthik, for your grassroots level view of challenges and recommendations that you offered to us today. Our next speaker for today's session is Dr. Surinder Singh Jodhka. He is a professor at School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. His areas of interest and specialization include social stratification, development studies in rural and agrarian change, social identity studies. He is a visiting faculty at various universities in India and Europe, as well as at University of Wisconsin-Madison, United States. He's authored and contributed to several publications in the aforesaid areas, which have been published by internationally acclaimed publishing houses such as Routledge and Oxford University Press. I now invite Dr. Surinder Singh Jodhka to speak on the topic, Punjab Agriculture, Beyond Politics and Productivity. Dr. Jodhka.
Thank you very much, Naad Pargaas, for asking me to be in this webinar. Lots of things have already been said, which I wanted to talk about, but I think it also gives me, in some sense, a context to respond to some of those issues and add to what has already been said. And I think the starting point obviously has to be the farmers' movement, which everyone has been talking about in 2020 and 2021, when farmers were sitting on the outskirts of Delhi, that in some sense has compelled us to take the question of agriculture seriously. And perhaps that is partly the reason why we are talking about agriculture today. And I think I was very kind of impressed by the manner in which Amandeep Singh ji started talking about agriculture in a very unconventional manner, questions of imaginations and the manner in which, in some sense, one should kind of see agriculture not simply as an economic activity, but also as a kind of, as a system of life. And that, in some sense, is the way we need to talk about not only agriculture, perhaps many other things. Also, I think the kind of things that have been talked about, sustainability and policy, they have been, in some sense, in circulation for quite some time. And I think most of that has already been said. My position, I mean, I come from sociology background, so my presentation is largely going to, in some sense, reflect on these issues using what I call as historical and sociological imaginations, rather than philosophical and psychological imaginations, I think. But they are, in some sense, overlapping and they're very closely connected. I don't have a presentation. I thought about presentation. I made some slides and then I decided not to do that, because then presentation also, in some sense, makes it easier in some sense. So I thought, let's kind of try to think about some of the things that I've been thinking about. I've also written about them, and I'm still kind of working on and working on agriculture from the perspective of future rather than just the present. In some sense, earlier presentations have also, in some sense, engaged with agriculture from the perspective of future rather than thinking of it as a burden or a problem. So my main focus is going to be on the questions of framing. And that framing needs to be revisited, because many of the problems, if one can describe them, or many of these crises also come from the manner in which agriculture has been framed. And this framing is not simply done in Punjab by Punjab government or the policy makers or by the cultivating farmers. I think the framing of agriculture is in some sense embedded in our own, in some sense, imaginations of the modern world. I think Amandeep Singh had started talking about it. But I think I would like to kind of revisit that there is a kind of question of agriculture and its relationship with the modernity. Now, modernity is not something that we can ignore when we are thinking about agriculture, because most of the people who talk about agriculture, including all of us who are sitting together to talk about agriculture, we are in some sense distanced from agriculture. And agriculture is a field which is talked about mostly by urban residents and people who think that they know about agriculture, what is good for it. I think primarily the problem with the farm laws was also that somehow bureaucrats and policymakers in Delhi thought, or media people in Delhi thought that they know about agriculture much better than these farmers whom they think that they are incapable of understanding what is good for them. I think that the point that was made in earlier presentation about negotiated policy making, in some sense, is the way forward. And I really like the fact that we see people who engage in agriculture as citizens, and that itself is a big question. And why is it that farmer is not seen as citizen? Farmer is still, in some sense, a more what one should say contemporary category. The word that comes to one's mind when one is talking about agriculture and its framing is a peasant, right? And the word peasant has a very specific meaning in the Western cultural context as well as in the Indian cultural context, because it comes to India from the Western context, and it was introduced in India mostly by the left-wing historians and economists. And then you think of peasant as somebody who is a subsistence producing, stupid almost. Actually, if you look at the synonymous of peasant, it would be, in some sense, somebody who has no idea about the world, and he's limited. It's always a man who is limited in his location in a small setting, and he only knows about his profession and nothing else. And rest of the world, in some sense, will shape what is going to be the future of peasant. So in some sense, the way modernity unfolds itself, both as a process of articulation or philosophizing, and also as a process of change, as a process of material change, in some sense leaves the peasant behind, or leaves the peasant in some sense irrelevant. There's a very well-known statement made by a peasantologist called Theodor Shannon, and he says, and I've quoted it in my writings at several places, that modernity defines itself as a world without the peasant. In some sense, starting point of modern times is that when you move from village and peasant becomes a proletariat and comes to the city and becomes a worker, and rural in some sense begins to decline, and you have industrialization. And for the first time with industrialization, not that cities did not exist earlier, but with industrialization, city also becomes the site of production, and agriculture in some sense is made very peripheral. And even in agriculture, the peasant in some sense is replaced by an enterprising farmer. Farmer is not really a peasant. Farmer is somebody who in some sense looks at farming as an entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur who looks at market, who looks at weather, who looks at profit and loss, and produces primarily for the market. And this is the distinction we make in sociology and anthropology between peasant and farmer. Peasant is a surplus, is a subsistence producing traditional agriculturists, while farmer is an entrepreneurial kind of individual who is engaged in agriculture as a kind of cultivator, but would also use machinery, would also engage with market, would also perhaps do other things. And that's happening. But I think this kind of formal definition of modernity and agriculture also has another context at the global level, and that is the manner in which it comes to us living in countries of the global south, which we now call as global south, and that is the colonial context. And I think colonial context also becomes a defining moment for agriculture. The way agriculture is not only imagined, but also its own economic being. And I think if you look at the history of Indian agriculture until the 17th century, 18th century, India is agriculturally perhaps the most prosperous or one of the most prosperous regions of the world. That's why they come here. They didn't come here to trade cloth or ornaments. They actually, the Westerner the traders came here in order to buy spices, in order to trade in agriculture. So agriculture was the source of all the wealth. And this was the region, India and China was the region in the world where large majority of the global wealth was. And this is not something that I'm saying. Even economists like Thomas Piketty have actually drawn those maps until 17th, 18th century. Most of the global wealth was located in South Asia and China. So the fact is that this is very important for us because it is because of the colonial plunder, massive plunder, not only through trade, but also through institutionalizing certain kind of agricultural practices where cultivators were forced to change their cropping pattern because they needed cotton in Britain, that Indian agriculture actually went into this status of backwardness. Famine was something which actually was, there's plenty of literature on famines. It was produced by the colonial policies, and we know it very well, the way cropping pattern changes and the way cultivating peasant is made, in some sense, a tenant on his own land and demotivate to work hard. So I think the idea of backwardness, which is very closely connected with agriculture and peasant cultivation, is something that comes to India, gets institutionalized during the British colonial period. And I think it's very, very critical to recognize this fact that Indian agriculture was not backward until 17th, 18th century. India was not a land of villages. India was land of urban civilization. India was land of enterprising cultivators. India was land of all kinds of other riches. Not that there was no poverty, but India was perhaps more prosperous than Europe. And agriculture was the site where most of the wealth was created and generated. It was then extracted by the rulers through land revenue. So I think giving this historical centrality to agriculture as a vibrant economy is very critical, because we are always made to think through modernization theory, rural agrarian being as traditional as being backward. And then you have this economist Lewisian theory that gradually transformation happens. That is a localized experience of Western Europe. And that localized experience of Western Europe and then translated into textbooks of economics and text theories of social change, of economic transformation. And that is something that we also internalize, and then that becomes our common sense. And that's why middle class attitude towards agriculture is very, very elitist and very hegemonic and very condescending. And I think that's where the condescendence rises. That's why we need to engage with this global framing of agriculture and the manner in which it comes to us through colonial plunder. And the colonial plunder then produces a kind of backwardness, and the nationalist elite also accept that colonial theorization of Indian agriculture, as people like Bernard Cohn would say. And I think that's very, very critical, because when people like Gandhi, Nehru, or even Ambedkar are talking about rural India, have written on this, or agriculture, they are buying into the colonial narratives of Indian agriculture, Indian society, that India is land of villages, and villages are inhabited by these poor peasants, and poor peasants have eternally been stupid and innocent. I mean, if you read Nehru's discovery of India, he kind of makes these statements. Even Ambedkar would say that, village is basically a stagnant place where nothing happens. There's no dynamism there. So in some sense, India's freedom movement again frames agriculture in similar kind of colonial and modernist framework, where agriculture is seen as a site of backwardness, and we need to do something to improve it. And that is seen as a natural state of agriculture, not as something some people are saying, talking about drain of wealth and stuff like that. And also the way colonial policies in some sense create backwardness. But overall, if you look at theorization of agriculture in the first 5-year plan or second 5-year plan, it goes with this, backwardness as a natural state, as agriculture was backward and is backward. And this is how Europe was in the 18th century or 17th century, and India is now in the 19th or 20th century, and we need to do that, do something about it. So this brings to my second point, and that is how agriculture is framed by the Indian nation state, and how it in some sense borrows these global or Western framings of agriculture and tries to in some sense use those framings, theorizations, into the manner in which development planning is envisaged. And I think India, after independence, becomes a developmental state. And that point is very, very critical. And I think it came out very clearly in earlier presentation that biggest challenge that India faced in early 1950s or after independence, after partition question was slightly settled, was the hunger. And hunger was not something that anybody could have taken lightly. And economists have pointed it out, that how this disconnect with the colonial ruler immediately increased productivity of land. In Punjab, for example, before Green Revolution in 1950s, agriculture grew by around 4.6%. So it suddenly kind of growth. Agriculture Punjab was already developing. But hunger was a much bigger problem. Hunger was also globally theorized by the Western economists. And there was this whole theory of Malthusian time bomb, that hunger could actually increase in times to come, because population in these countries was going to increase, and that population increase was going to be at a much larger pace than increase in productivity. And the Western academia and Western establishment was very scared of countries like India turning into socialist countries. And I think the word Green Revolution was not coined by accident. It was a substitute to the possibility of Red Revolution. So I think it is in this context that the developmental state, in collaboration with the Western, in some sense, social science establishment, but also agricultural research establishment, comes up with this new framework. And many people actually say that Green Revolution technology was not required. Indian agriculture had already picked up, because the colonial plunder had reduced. and we had lots of seeds, and now many people are saying sustainability question as it was raised. The earlier seeds were much more sustainable, and Indian agriculture could have done without Green Revolution, but somehow the Green Revolution package was sold, and I personally feel it did work, even though it created lots of side effects. But it was very closely connected to the times in 1950s and 60s when we had what we call as the Cold War, the First World and the Second World, and countries of the global North, the current countries of Western Europe as well as North America, they were really anxious about third world countries or non-aligned countries going the Soviet way. So I think it is in this context that Green Revolution in some sense comes to us, but in some sense Green Revolution also helps, but it kind of also has many other issues that have already been talked about. And that is where Punjab becomes a very important site for this question of hunger and the question of food. And that's how Punjab, which also included in some sense Haryana in 1960s, early 60s. So this was the region of Western UP. So Green Revolution was, as we know, was not implemented everywhere. But Punjab also had, and this is my third point where we think of Punjab, how Punjab frames agriculture question. So Punjab was not like other regions of India. Punjab, in some sense, even during the colonial period, witnessed agricultural growth because the colonial rulers came here towards the end of their rule. I mean, in much later than other parts of the subcontinent. But they also invested in this region in developing agriculture. We all know about canal colonies. Canal colonies involved people being taken from the present-day Indian Punjab to the Western Punjab, places like Lalpur, Mint-Kumri, and they were asked to cultivate lands there. And there was canalization. If you look at the history of canalization in this region, it starts in the late 19th century. Bhakra Dam actually was visualized by the colonial rulers, and its foundation stone was laid before India's independence. So it was already a region which was seen as with a lot of agricultural potential. And that's why after independence, Indian state looks towards Punjab, that this is the region that could perhaps help us solve our food crisis. And that's how Punjab gets identified with Green Revolution. And this is again something which is very interesting, because Punjab was not the only region where Green Revolution was introduced. Apart from Haryana, Western UP, parts of Gujarat, parts of Maharashtra, parts of Karnataka, parts of Tamil Nadu, all these regions had. Eastern India was seen as hopeless, because even though Eastern India also had a lot of water, even if you go to Bihar today, the quality of land in Bihar is excellent. These are Gangetic plains. This was the most prosperous region, one of the most prosperous region in the world in the 18th century, 17th, 18th century. But somehow the Indian state did not invest in Bihar. And one of the theses is that local vested interest, landed interest, did not want Indian state to develop Bihar, because they thought development would imply their power would go away and the local people and the poorer people would become more assertive. Anyway, so Green Revolution in some sense is then introduced in Punjab, and Green Revolution is obviously a success. And it was in many ways a revolution in the sense that it revolutionized food grain production. We have had some discussion about paddy. Initially, paddy was seen as also in positive terms, because with the canalization of the region after Bhakra Nangal Dam came and new canals came, there were also a lot of water logging in many parts of the state. So paddy was seen as an alternative. If paddy was as was being talked about by earlier presentation, if there was more extensive scientific engagement with the region, it would have been possible to identify pockets of Punjab where paddy cultivation would have been sustainable. Because of water logging, no crops could be grown. And paddy was the crop that could be grown, and it also needed water. So tube well could also pull the water out from land. And this waterlogging was happening because of canalization, and these were kacha canals, and the water was seeping into the earth. So if that kind of thing would have done, paddy would have been partly sustainable. But then Punjab farmers became paddy obsessed, because that was the crop which gave them profit. Wheat was partly consumed, partly its prices were at the most at the price which was declared by the state. but paddy always sold at a higher price, right? After basmati came, there was global market, paddy prices go up 3-4 times. So paddy became a profit crop. Wheat was still kind of partly self-consumed, but partly didn't give much return. So people get obsessed with paddy, and then you have this whole problem. Now, the third moment in Punjab after the Green Revolution is the post-Green Revolution period. Now, in the 1990s or late 80s, there are 2-3 things happening in Punjab. Now, with the introduction of Green Revolution, I'll come to this point in a short while, the social structure of Punjab also begins to change. And you have a new kind of capitalist farmer who becomes the norm, and land relations undergo significant change, the point that Amandeep ji was making about series and those kinds of relations. So you also have a new kind of mobile cultivator who is looking for mobility beyond agriculture. And some people have attributed the rise of Khalistan movement to this growing contradiction. Punjab has a very kind of complicated demographics. So Green Revolution, in some sense, has a political effect. And that political effect is that it, in some sense, foregrounds agriculture, and Punjab comes to be seen as land of agriculture. This is only a post-1960s reality. Punjab, even now, is one of the most urbanized regions of the country, right? If you look at 1950s, Punjab is one of the regions in the entire country, after perhaps, regions which have big cities which were set up by colonial rulers, cities like Bombay, Calcutta or Madras. Punjab was one of the most urbanized regions. Punjab is, even now, has perhaps in terms of its space, the number of million plus cities is quite large. Jalandhar, for example, Jalandhar was not an ordinary city. Jalandhar was the center of press for the entire subcontinent in some sense, right? All the Urdu press was in Jalandhar, Hindi press is in Jalandhar, English is not there, but these were the newspapers that were published and they were circulated all over the subcontinent. Urdu press, for example, from Jalandhar, it used to go up to Hyderabad, I think. Lahore obviously was very significant, but Amritsar also was to begin with an urban center, Ludhiana, Patiala, and many others. I mean, the whole Juti Road belt is an urban belt, right? So, and otherwise also you have, Bhatinda, Firozpur. If you actually count the number of cities, and these are all pre-colonial cities, right? So Punjab was an urban land, and when Amritsar was set up, Guru ne Shahr Vasaya. So Punjab was self-imagination of Punjab was very urban, but and Punjab had a vibrant urban middle class. Punjab had reform movements and stuff like that. So 1960s, due to this developmental state and then democratic politics, which brings Jat Sikh to the forefront of Punjab politics. And I think caste is very, very significant. If you look at post-1960s Punjab, even now, if you have to talk about agriculture, Amandeep ji was avoiding the word and he was using the word biradri, but that is not the point. It's actually a caste question, and how Jat farmer or Jat Sikh farmer becomes the normative Punjabi. And this normative Punjabi then becomes the natural leader of Punjab, or the category that in some sense claims Punjab, owns Punjab, or speaks on behalf of Punjab, because they also play regional politics. And this is a complicated question. I don't want to sound anti-Jat or anything, but it's actually empirically, that's how Akali Dal becomes Akali. All the Akali leadership comes from Malwa region of Punjab. Malwa is the only region where you had big land holdings, right? And almost entire, except for, I think, the Congress leader, what was his name, Zail Singh, most of the chief ministers of Punjab have been Jat Sikhs who are substantial landowners, almost landlords with hundreds of acres of effective ownership of land from Malwa region of Punjab. So there is a kind of, and it's a post-60s development. It's before that. Punjab is very urban, and urban Khatri Aroras, they are the ones who are elites of Punjab. I mean, if you look at the Sikh leadership of the reform movements of the late 19th century, early 20th century, people who led SGPC, all of them were Khatri Punjabis, mostly urban Sikhs. And in 1960s, Jat Sikh becomes the normative Punjabi. And this normative Punjabi then also normalizes agriculture, or becomes the spokesperson of Punjab. So Punjab becomes synonymous with agriculture, with village. And the term I have used in my writing is a kind of agrarianism, where agriculture acquires the centrality in Punjab. And until 1990, if you look at the actual economy of Punjab, Punjab continues to be very, very vibrant in its urban economy. Punjab's industry in Ludhiana, for example, because of collapse of Soviet Union and Khalistan movement, it collapsed. But Ludhiana was one of the major industrial center in the entire North India. Actually, NCR develops later. Ludhiana was already there. Jalandhar also had its own industry. Amritsar, blanket industry. I mean, I was told in 1990s, I was doing some field work, I think early 2000s. And this chap, my taxi driver, counted 150 factories which used to produce blanket was shut down in Punjab in 1990. So 1990 saw a major deindustrialization of Punjab. But still the normative spokesperson for Punjab becomes the Jat Sikh landlord leader. Now, this also 1990s is very important because you have Khalistan movement before that, but also with the economic liberalization, the hegemonic space of agriculture is beginning to lose. And one of the reasons for this hegemonic space to lose is the mobility of Jat Sikh enterprising farmer himself. I published a paper in Economic and Political Weekly. It's called Beyond Crises, where I'd seen how, and around that time, I did a survey of 51 villages, and most of that work was published in Economic and Political Weekly, where I actually found many rich farmers who were living in urban areas. So they had a kothi in Mohali, but they were sarpanches of the village, right? So they continued to cultivate their land, but their next generation was looking for urban employment. So they wanted their children to study in English medium school, and from there perhaps go to Canada or to Europe, or at least get into urban employment, because they had figured out their limits to agriculture mobility. So you have this, one should not look at Punjab in unitary terms. There are various other factors that are happening. And if you look at the demographics of Punjab, it's very interesting. Almost entire urban Punjab is majority non-Sikh, right? Most of the trade is controlled by the urban Khatris, urban Hindus, mostly trading caste. They make for around 15% of the total population of Punjab, but they hegemonize the urban because the urban, even cities like Amritsar would have 70-80% urban population as Hindu, listed as Hindu. There are other problems with this demographic classification. Rural Punjab also, if you look at Jat Sikh, total population is not more than 25%, right? There is Dalit population, which is scheduled caste population, which now counts around 32%. They are not, all of them are not actually Dalits. Dalit would be around 25%, and the rest of them have pushed their way into the list through lobbying, because, last community, Raya Sikhs, they are not really, they have never experienced untouchability. They are more like they should have been in the list of scheduled tribe. Punjab also doesn't have an ST list. So all of them are also listed along with scheduled castes. So this figure of 32% is very problematic. Actual Dalit population of Punjab will be around 22%, but scheduled caste population is 32%. And these are very important facts. Now, with Green Revolution, what happens is, and this is again something on which I have written, there is an autonomization of Dalit communities. They are no longer dependent on their Jat farmers, right? They are not hired by Jat farmers as series. Most of the laboring work, attached labor work in Punjab is done by migrant labor. You go to any village, any big farmer, they would have 5 or 6 attached laborers, and most of them would be from Bihar or some other part of the country. And this started with Green Revolution formalizing agrarian relation, that they wanted to take work and pay them rather than have tied relationship. There's plenty of literature on that. One can talk about it because I don't have much time. So this, in some sense, begins to weaken the hegemonic position that Jats acquired in 1960s by the late 1980s because of autonomization of Dalits. Dalits begin to assert. Initially, there are strikes at village level, but then they're also translate into conflicts. Somebody was talking about ponds, and I've actually done an empirical work on ponds. Why did the ponds disappear? Ponds disappear because land was very valued, and Dalits filled up their ponds and turned them into community centers because they were getting some, and they have their own gurudwaras, and they set up those those kinds of institutions which would give them dignity and autonomy. And they no longer identified with their landed jats with whom they were earlier kind of connected in a very kind of personal tied relationship. And this autonomization of Dalits has had major consequences. Apart from local conflict, it has also begun to influence politics. If you look at the language of farmers' movement, and again, I have published a paper in Journal of Peasant Studies where I try to analyze this, where if you look at the farmers' movement of 1980s, the Jat farmers are not speaking as Jat farmers. Jat farmers are speaking as farmers representing the entire village. The famous language of Bharat versus India, they represented the entire rural. But in the last recent farmers' movement, they are talking about Dalit Bhaichara as being separate from the cultivating castes. And they needed to kind of give space to Dalit Bhaichara. They needed to give space to people who are Kammi or Mazdoor. So this kind of recognition that we were actually limited, we were not the entire rural, and the other rural had the capacity to speak for itself. So I think this in some sense fragments Punjab by 1990s in many significant ways with neoliberal economic policies and food scarcity no longer being the fact. The Indian national elite is no longer looking towards Punjab for anything, right? Punjab becomes marginalized. Punjab becomes marginalized in the national imagination of its own developmental trajectories. And Punjab until 1990s was the top state in terms of per capita income, and gradually it begins to lose its kind of position. And now it's a kind of middling state. I think it's 7th or 8th or maybe 10th or 12th. If you look at the per capita income, its per capita income is only slightly more than perhaps the national average. So this marginalization of Punjab has many other aspects. And it is in this context that agriculture begins to become less significant, and the farm laws were passed during the government knew about it, that there would be protest, and this was a good opportunity to talk about. And Punjab in some sense was dispensable, right? If you look at, we all talk about, people who talk about Punjab agriculture, we still think that, India will starve without Punjab. If you look at wheat production, Punjab's position at the national level is number 3. The first state is, I think, Madhya Pradesh or UP. Second is Madhya Pradesh. Punjab is 3rd. If you look at rice production, Punjab is number 3. First is West Bengal. Second is UP. And 3rd is Punjab. If you look at the entire food grain production, Punjab is number 3. Is not number 1 in anything. So India can do without Punjab. So food grain in some sense becomes very marginal. Punjab's economy becomes very marginal. And Khalistan movement also had other implications. A lot of big wealth in some sense moved out of Punjab. Munjals, for example, their base is in Gurgaon, not in Punjab any longer. Many other Mahindras are Punjabis, right? So the big wealth in some sense, which in some sense becomes the site for further growth, is no longer there in Punjab. And when we talk about alternatives and agricultural, what one should say, diversification, we also need to be a little more sociological and a little more grounded. I think there are many other issues that we need to talk about. So Punjab's agriculture is already actually getting diversified. It's not the only economy, right? Even though, as I think we were talking about, the annual report says Punjab is an agricultural state. Not true empirically, right? Only 26% of the male workers are employed in agriculture. And if you actually do primary survey, households that depend exclusively on agriculture, their number would not be more than 15 to 20%, at the most 25% of the rural Punjab, right? Not more than 25% of the rural households depend exclusively on agriculture. We have what is called as pluri-activity, right? You have 3 acres of land, you cultivate that land, but one person is also employed as a police constable, somebody drives taxi. You go to any household, enterprising households, and Punjabis are enterprising given their resources, limited resources, they would do all kinds of things. And agriculture is not the only activity. The bigger the farmers, the more diversified they are. It's only the small families, small holdings that are likely to be exclusively agriculture. And this is something I think we need to empirically engage with much more. But even then, Punjab agriculture is far ahead of the national agriculture, right? If you look at, I think this is again data available in the annual economic survey, the per acre productivity of land in Punjab is highest in the country, perhaps 3 times that of some other backward states of India. But green revolution has gone elsewhere also, as I said. And but agriculture at some level continues to remain very critical. And I think some of those were earlier commented on by Amandeep Singh ji, that how it is in some sense also related with Sikhi. So if you are actually committed to agriculture, it is possible to mobilize Punjabi sentiment around agriculture. And that's what farmers were able to do. And farmers were not mobilized only agriculturists. The younger generation was also not coming to the farm sites. It was through music, it was through Sikhi, it was through some other kind of, imaginations of Punjabiness that they were able to actually bring everyone together, including the Punjabi Hindu. The communal divide that Punjab used to have actually disappeared. Okay, my final question now, going back to some of the things that we started with, questions of framing. And I think that's where the solution or the future of Punjab agriculture lies. We need to recognize, or we need to localize the European experience of economic change. That the so-called modernity was the 19th century Europe's own privileged position where they could colonize many parts of the world, and they could also colonize lands where they could send their surplus population. We don't have that option, right? India doesn't have that option. So even though 15% rural households depend exclusively on agriculture, 50% of Punjabis are connected with the village. 50% of Punjabis are connected with agriculture. That connection is very critical. I think we were talking about the diasporic imagination, how they could connect with Virsa, the idea of Virsa, and then you go back to the village. And I think these are very, very important things. Even Dalits feel connected to agriculture because that's where his or her life is, right? So not that cities are not critical, but cities also have this kind of agrarian imagination because of some regional kind of cultures. And I think that's where we need to think of agriculture not as economic activity alone. Agriculture is also the second part of agriculture. Culture means you think yourself through certain kind of, many of us who had nothing to do with agriculture felt very connected with the farmers' movement because they were wearing turban, they were doing ardas, they had gurudwaras, they were talking about Sikhi, and they were talking about mitti, right? And mitti is something that connects us with each other. And I think that imagination needs to be, in some sense, done outside the framework of Western modernity. And this is where perhaps we need to have the courage. And that's why I liked the way we started this meeting today. But at the same time, we also need to be more proactively engaged with the empirical, the way the second presentation was doing, that we need to think of negotiated policies, and state would remain very critical. So the biggest problem with farm laws was that state wanted to run away, and farmers figured it out. Agriculture in the present day world cannot survive without state. Nobody can survive without state. Look at corporate sector. Corporate sector eats away so much more, hundreds, thousands of times more subsidy than agriculture. It's just because it's much more hegemonic. So state remains very critical, and state wanted to run away from agriculture. And that's why farmers did not want it to run away. Yes, subsidies need to be reimagined, but for that, we need much more active empirical engagement with agriculture. And the points that came out earlier very clearly, that we need to constantly not only talk to farmers, but also look at their economies, look at their aspirations. Nobody wants to do agriculture in the second generation. Even if you are 200 acres of farmers, your children want to go and live in the city. Their daughters-in-law want to live in cities. They don't want to live in the village. And they actually don't live in the village any longer, right? So if you look at big farmers of Punjab, anyone who has more than 30 acres of land, they would also have an urban property. We don't even talk about these things. So how does one imagine the so-called farmer? We go back to this category. These are unenterprising farmers. They're not peasants. They're not stupid. And I saw the way Punjabi farmers, particularly the Punjabi farmers, were articulating questions of not only agriculture, but also questions of life on the borders of Delhi. It was not a rustic rural articulation. It was cosmopolitan articulation, much smarter than our members of parliament speaking in the parliament or on television channels. The Delhi economists centered in Delhi were talking about the Punjab agriculture. They had no idea. They had no idea about life, live aside agriculture, right? Live aside Punjab. And the Punjabi farmer was not talking about himself. Most of them were men. All the farm leaders continue to be men, even though women participated, but their participation was add-on. It wasn't, it's still a very patriarchal occupation. So the point that one needs to recognize that these are not ordinary people. They're citizens. And they know about their life, like I know about my life. Rupanjali ji would know about gender much better than me because she's woman and she's a kind of bureaucrat and she understands that context. So they know their context, but their context is also always dynamic. And we need to empirically engage with that. And my final point is that when we talk about policy, when we talk about futures, we also need to talk about agency. And that's what we don't do. That's where question of negotiated policy is very, very critical. Who is going to be the actor? Is the average villager interested in agriculture? How much is he interested in agriculture, other than having some profit from land? That's where, everybody knows about water going down. A farmer is the one who invests in kind of, on tube well, which is called as, the one that kind of takes you down and then you have to pull water. And it's much more expensive, right? Not that they don't know about it. Water levels are going down. They understand every single thing. You talk to any farmer, average farmer, even 80-year-old women were articulating questions of agriculture so well and so smartly, so intelligently. So they know about it. But somehow we need to somehow identify or work on finding agency. State is obviously very, very critical. Bureaucracy is very critical. But we also need to, which farmer to talk about? Who has stakes in agriculture? Who has stakes in futures of rural Punjab or agrarian Punjab? Thank you. I will stop here and hope I'm not taking too much time.
Dr. Jyotka employed his expertise and extreme merit and acumen in the field of sociology and social sector and awareness to present the patterns of his thought and analysis here. As he framed, he called upon the need to respectfully as well as empirically frame the future of Punjab agriculture, the imagination of a futuristic Punjab agriculture where, the European experience, the colonized experience of agriculture, which was ushered in around the 1960s and before, that needs to be shed, and we need to connect in a different way in light of all the evolution that has happened pre-Green Revolution and post-Green Revolution. And that evolution should bear on, creating, a proactive engagement with the empirical and treating and acknowledging that the farmers and perhaps even the peasants of the modern day are more aware and more advanced in their thinking, and the fact that ecological responsibility is necessary. But in spite of that awareness of preserving the nature and how the crop patterns are impacting ecology and impacting our lands, in spite of that awareness, what is the role that the state can play? We have immense amount of data available. We have some models coming up for the next generation agricultural policy envisioning, such as engaging, the farmers in drafting policies, the kind of frameworks they'd like to see. I think that the call to the policymakers presently is incorporate a multifaceted input from different sectors: the farmer himself, herself, the peasant, the farmers who have a specific clout or a scope of influence in the areas they work, as well as really not treat this as the sole prerogative of bureaucracy and the government, the state, although he does recognize that, the state should remain engaged. There's absolutely no way that the state can really wean itself away from the farming sector, much as the corporate sector calls upon for states' engagement and assistance when it's needed. Farming sector should remain engaged in much the same way. Yet the future of Punjab's agricultural imagination does need to call for input and import from various sectors of the society. I think that's one of the key theses that evolved as Dr. Surinder Singh Jodhkar took us into the historical time frame and brought us to the modern context. Thank you, Dr. Jodhkar, for your immensely unique perspective from a sociological lens on the farming sector's potential. Now, Professor Jagdish Singh, I'd like to call upon Professor Jagdish Singh to provide his presiding remarks. Professor Jagdish Singh is Director of Naad Pargaas, Sri Amritsar, Punjab. He is serving as the presiding officer of this event, and I invite him to offer his remarks at this time. Professor Singh. Professor Singh, you might want to go and unmute yourself. Yes, you're unmuted.
A webinar ਨੂੰ ਅਰੇਂਜ ਕਰਨ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਮੰਥਨ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਕਿਸੇ ਸੁਧਾਰ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟੀਕਲ ਨੀਡ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਭਾਵਨਾਵਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਬਰ 'ਚ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਅਰੇਂਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਇਸ ਦੀ ਨੇਚਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਅਸਰ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਵੈਬੀਨਾਰ ਕੋਈ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਦਿਸ਼ਾ ਦੇਣੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਫੀਲਡਸ ਨੂੰ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਗਿਆਨ ਸ਼ਾਸਤਰੀ ਸੂਝ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਡਾਟੇ ਨੂੰ, ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਵਿਸ਼ੇ ਦੇ ਵਿਸਥਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਸਹਿਜਮਈ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਉਸ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਉਮੀਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਅਰੇਂਜ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਵਿਸ਼ਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੀ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਹਰਕਤ ਨਾਲ ਭਰਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਮੋਸ਼ਨਸ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਦਰਦ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਲੋੜ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਫਰਸਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਕਲਚਰ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਅਤੇ ਲੋਕਲ, ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਅਤੇ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਪਸਾਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਹਨ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਠਹਿਰਾਅ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਵਿਸ਼ੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਸਹਿਜ ਸਾਰਥਕਤਾ ਨਾਲ, ਕਿਸੇ ਬੈਲੈਂਸ ਨਾਲ, ਠੀਕ ਕੈਟੇਗਰਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਾਂ ਦੇਖਣ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਦਿਸ਼ਾ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰੀਏ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਆਧਾਰ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰ ਸਕੀਏ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਈਡੀਏ ਦੀ ਕਲੈਰਿਟੀ, ਪਰਸਪੈਕਟਿਵ ਮੇਕਿੰਗ ਅਤੇ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਅਤੇ ਪੋਲਿਸੀ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਐਥੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਅਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ੁੱਧ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਦਾ ਉਹ ਪਸਾਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਇਨਸਾਈਟਸ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਲਈ ਜਾਵੇ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਾਫੀ ਸੰਘਣੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਸੋਚਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਕੋਈ ਈਵੈਂਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਰਵ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ੁੱਧ ਚਿੰਤਨਸ਼ੀਲਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਰਪਿਤ ਵੈਬੀਨਾਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਰੇਂਜ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਸਥਿਰਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਲੱਭਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਸ ਪਰੰਪਰਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਵਿਸ਼ੇ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਵਧੇ, ਉਸ ਪਰੰਪਰਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਾਪਰਦੀਆਂ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫੈਕਟ ਆ, ਫੈਕਟ ਆਪਣੀ ਪਿਓਰਿਟੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਗਵਾ ਲੈਂਦਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਫੈਕਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਅਧੂਰੀਆਂ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਇਰ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਬਣਤਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਉਲਝਦਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਦੇਖਣ ਦੀ, ਅਮਨਦੀਪ ਦਾ ਲੈਕਚਰ ਉਸ ਦਿਸ਼ਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਮਾਨਸਿਕ ਬਣਤਰ ਦੇ, ਆਪਣੀ ਰਿਸੈਪਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ, ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਉਹ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰੀਏ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਫੈਕਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਸੀਵ ਬੜੀ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁੱਧਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਗਵਾ ਕੇ ਜਾਂ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਪੇਨ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਸੀਵ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਫੈਕਟ ਨੂੰ ਓਬਜੈਕਟਿਵਲੀ ਪੂਰਾ ਫੀਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦਾ, ਜਾਂ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਓਬਜੈਕਟਿਵਲੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ ਆ ਉਹਦੀ ਓਬਜੈਕਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਧੁੰਦਲੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੀ ਰਿਸੈਪਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਸੋ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਪੇਚੀਦਾ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਧਿਆਨ 'ਚ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਪਛਾਣ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਇਕੱਲਾ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ, ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਸੋਚਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਸਲਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਡਾਟੇ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਧਿਰਾਂ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਹੈਲਦੀਲੀ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ, ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਆਧਾਰ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ, ਜਾਂ ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਉੱਦਮ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਵੈਬੀਨਾਰ ਇਸ ਦਿਸ਼ਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀਗਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟੌਪਿਕਸ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ, ਅਮਨਦੀਪ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਵੱਡੇ ਫਰੇਮ ਦੀ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਨਜਿੱਠਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਨਾਲ ਦੇ ਹਵਾਲੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਾਟਾ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਪਰਸਪੈਕਟਿਵਸ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੀਆਂ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨਸ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਫੀਅਰਸ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਉਮੀਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀ ਆ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਮੈਟਾਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਹਾਲਤ ਦੀ ਟਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਸੀ ਉਸ ਮੈਟਾਫਿਜ਼ਿਕਸ ਨਾਲ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਕੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਹੁਣ ਵਿਸ਼ੇ ਦਾ ਜੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਖੋਲ੍ਹਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਵਿਸਥਾਰ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਥਿੰਕਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ। ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰਸ, ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਤੇ ਪੀਪਲ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੈਲਦੀ ਬੈਲੈਂਸ ਕਿੰਝ ਬਣੇ। ਸੋ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਸਕਾਲਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਨੂੰ ਰੱਖ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਵਿਸ਼ਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਉਸ ਸਕਾਲਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੀ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਮਾਡਰਨ ਏਜ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੱਧ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਇਕੱਲਾ ਇੱਕ ਉਤਸ਼ਾਹੀ ਜੋਸ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੈਗੇਟਿਵ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨਸ, ਉਲਝੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਬਾਈਨਰੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਇੱਕ ਤਰਸ ਭਰੀ ਨੈਤਿਕਤਾ ਰਿਸੀਵ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਟਰਕਚਰਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਵੋਲਵ ਕਰਦਾ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਚਿਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਕਾਲਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੀਆਂ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨਸ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਨਾ ਹੋਣ। ਸੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਮਸਲੇ, ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਕੂਲਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਟ ਕਰਦੇ। ਸੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਇਕੋਨਮੀ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਕੂਲਸ ਹਨ, ਇਹ ਮੈਂ ਹੁਣ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਜ਼ਾਹਰ ਕਰਾਂ ਕਿ ਨਾ ਕਰਾਂ। ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਚਾਹਿਆ ਸੀ, ਮੈਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਖੋਲ੍ਹਦਾ, ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਚਾਹਿਆ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਬੜੇ ਮੌਕੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ ਵੱਡੇ ਲੀਡਰਸ ਦੇ ਤੱਕ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਈ ਸੀ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਦੇ ਸਟੇਜ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦੀ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਦੀ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਰੱਖਣ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁੱਧਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਨਵਾਂ ਪਸਾਰ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਪਰ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਅੰਦਰਲੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ, ਉਹ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ। ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਕੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਸੀ, ਉਹਦੇ ਹੋਰ ਪੇਚੀਦਾ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਚੱਲ ਸਕੇ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰੇ ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਵੈਬੀਨਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਨੌਲੇਜ, ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਏਰੀਆ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀਜ਼ ਆ ਤੇ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਿੰਗ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਸੋਸ਼ੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਨਾਲਿਸਿਸ ਹਨ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਫਲੂਇਡਿਟੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ। ਉਹ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਮੈਟਾਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਸਟੈਗਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਕੱਢਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੋਸ਼ੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੀ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੀ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡਿੰਗ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਫਲੂਇਡਿਟੀ ਲਿਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਫਲੂਇਡਿਟੀ ਮੈਟਾਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਟਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਸੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹੀ ਹਰ ਵਾਰੀ ਆਵੇ, ਇਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਲੂਇਡਿਟੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਅੰਦਾਜ਼ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਇੱਕ ਖਾਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਨਾਲ, ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਨਾਲ ਲੋਡਡ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਮਪਟੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਡਾਟੇ ਦੀ ਟਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਸੀ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ। ਇਹ ਸੋਸ਼ੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਐਨਾਲਿਸਿਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇਹ ਜੇ ਪਰਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਫਲੂਇਡਿਟੀ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਕਾਰਗਰ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਅਟਰੈਕਟਿਵ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਉਹਦਾ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਫਿਕਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕੋਈ ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਸੋ ਪਰ ਐ ਵੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਫਲੂਇਡਿਟੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਸਪੈਕਟ ਆ ਉਹ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਟਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਟ ਮੈਟਾਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡਾਟਾ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰ ਦਾ ਡਾਟਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਨਕੌਂਸ਼ੀਅਸ ਪੈਟਰਨਸ ਆ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਮੁਕਤ ਹੋਵੇ। ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬਰੀਕ ਤਰੇੜਾਂ ਹਨ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜਿਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਦਰਦ ਹੈ, ਸੋ ਦਰਦ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨਾਲ ਢੱਕ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਸੋ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਅਨਾਊਂਸਮੈਂਟਸ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਣ ਸਕਦਾ, ਉਹਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਪੇਨ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਨਾਲ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਉਸ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਸ ਸੰਘਣੇਪਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਬਾਕੀ ਮਸਲੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਹੱਲ ਕਰ ਲਾਂਗੇ, ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਜੋਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡਦੇ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ, ਤੇ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ। ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਥਿੰਕਰ ਆ ਉਹਨੇ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਿਆਂ ਪਾਉਣ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਡਾਟਾ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ, ਨੋਵਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਸਟੈਗਨੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਆ, ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ਡ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਆ, ਪੋਪੂਲਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟਰੁੱਥਸ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਟਰੀਟਮੈਂਟ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅੰਡਰ ਕਰੰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟਰੁੱਥਸ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਜਿਬ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਆ, ਤੇ ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ਡ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਪਈ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਉਜਾਗਰ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਬਿਲਡ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਸੋ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਬਣਦਾ। ਪਰ ਇਹ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਈ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਮੈਟਾਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲਸ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਇੱਕ ਡਾਟੇ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁੱਧਤਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਇਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਵੱਡੇ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ 'ਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਕੋਈ ਸਾਇੰਟਿਸਟ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਥਿੰਕਰ ਨੂੰ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ 'ਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ। ਸੋ ਹਰ ਲੈਵਲ ਦਾ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਆ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਕਿ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਓਬਜੈਕਟਿਵ ਸਟੱਡੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਜਾਂ ਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਜੋ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੰਸਟਰਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੋ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਹਨ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਰੈਸ਼ਨਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਕੋਈ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਨੂੰ ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਂ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਸਾਇੰਸਿਸ ਦੀ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲ ਆ ਕਿਸੇ ਧਰਤੀ ਦਾ, ਉਹ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈਲਦੀ ਰੋਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਦਾ ਕਰਦਾ। ਉਹ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੀ ਟੁੱਟ ਭੱਜ ਤੇ ਲੋੜਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਦੀ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਬਣਾਉਂਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਥੋੜੀ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਪਰ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫਿਰ ਆਪਣੀ ਪਿਓਰਿਟੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਸਮਝਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰੂਪਾਂਜਲੀ, ਕਾਰਤਿਕ ਜੀ ਤੇ ਗੁਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੇਪਰ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਠੀਕ ਡਾਟਾ, ਉਹਦੀ ਠੀਕ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਐਕਸਪੈਰੀਮੈਂਟਸ ਦੇ ਫੀਅਰ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਲੋੜਾਂ ਮੁਤਾਬਕ ਰਿਸਕ ਲੈਣੇ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਅਭਿਆਸਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਧੁੰਦਲੇਪਣ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਲਿਆਕਤ ਦੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਤੇ ਅਭਿਆਸ ਦੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਨਾਲ ਉਸਦੇ ਠੀਕ ਗਲਤ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਿਸਕ ਲੈਣੇ, ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਐਨਾਲਿਸਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਸੀ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਾਜਬੀਅਤ ਨੂੰ ਜੇ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਸ ਹਵਾਲੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦੇ ਹਵਾਲੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਹੋਰ ਡਾਇਮੈਂਸ਼ਨਸ ਦਿਖਾਉਂਦਾ ਆ, ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਰਥਕ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਸਾਡੀ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਹਿਣੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਚਿਰ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇੰਡਕਟਿਵ ਰੀਜ਼ਨਿੰਗ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਈ ਜਾਂਦੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚਿਰ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਸਬਜੈਕਟਿਵ ਆਸਪੈਕਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਵਰਤ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਹਨ, ਜਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਦੀ ਬਣਤਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵੜ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਹਨ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਉਸ ਸ਼ੁੱਧਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਡਾਇਵਰਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਖਿੱਚ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਹਨ, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਮੌਕੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਕਲਚਰਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ, ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇੰਟੈਂਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਕਾਲਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੀਆਂ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ, ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਮੈਗਜ਼ੀਨ ਜਾਂ ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਰਨਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਜਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਲਚਰਲ ਮੈਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਉਛਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਉਸ ਰਿਐਲਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੀ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਚਿਰ ਇੰਡਕਟਿਵ ਰੀਜ਼ਨਿੰਗ ਨੂੰ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਡਾਟੇ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਪਰਟੀਕੂਲਰ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੀ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀਜ਼ ਵਾਪਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਹਨ, ਉਸ ਦਾ ਪਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਆਉਂਦਾ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੀ ਕਲਚਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਈਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਮੈਂ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਲ ਕੋਈ ਬੜੇ ਸਧਾਰਨ ਜਿਹੇ ਅਰਥਾਂ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਵਰਤਦਾ, ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਈਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਗਿਆਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਰਨਲਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੀ ਚਲੋ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ, ਜੇ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਪਲੇ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਉਹਦੇ ਸਿੰਬਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਪਲੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਉਸ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਉਹਦੇ ਸੇਕਰਡ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਪਲੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਚਿਰ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇੰਡਕਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਇਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੈਬੀਨਾਰ ਆ, ਇਹ ਵੈਬੀਨਾਰ ਇੱਕ ਬੇਸਿਕਲੀ ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਵੈਲਪ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਆ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਉਹਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਵਾਲਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨੂੰ ਲਿਆ ਆ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ, ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨੀ, ਉਹਦੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਉਹਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਰਥਕ ਉਹਦੇ ਹਵਾਲੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਬਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ। ਜਿਵੇਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵਾਈਕਾਰ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬਰਾਦਰੀਆਂ ਦੇ, ਚਲੋ ਨਾ ਕਹੋ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਹਨ, ਜਦੋਂ ਇੰਡਕਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਵਾਈ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚੌਧਰੀ ਦਾ ਕਲਚਰ ਸੀ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਬਣਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਡਾ ਰੋਲ ਅਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਿਹਨੇ, ਸੋ ਉਹਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਸਟੱਡੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਈ। ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਾਵਲ ਲਿਖੇ ਗਏ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ 12 ਉਜਾੜਤੀਆਂ, ਸਾਡੇ ਜੰਗਲ ਉਜਾੜਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ, ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਉੱਥੇ ਨਾਵਲ ਲਿਖੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਇੰਡਕਟਿਵ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲ ਨਾਲ ਇਨਰ ਕੰਟਰਾਡਿਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਆਉਣਗੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਨਾਇਕਤਵ ਕਿੰਝ ਬਣਦਾ ਆ ਕਿਸੇ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਪਲੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਸਟੱਡੀ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਨੂੰ ਨਾਇਕ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ, ਕਿਹਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਅੱਗੇ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕ ਕਿੰਝ ਬਣਾਉਣੀ ਆ। ਸੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਪੇਨ ਨੂੰ, ਸੇਕਰਡਨੈਸ ਨੂੰ, ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਪਿਓਰਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਆਧਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੋਏ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਪੈਟਰਨ ਨੂੰ ਸਰਵ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਰਾਉਣਾ, ਇਹਦੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਮੈਚੋਰਿਟੀ ਰੱਖਦਾ ਆ। ਇਹ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਹੁਤੇ ਸੋਸ਼ੋਲੋਜਿਸਟ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੋਵਲਿਸਟ ਆ ਬਹੁਤੇ, ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਪੂਰੀ ਸਮਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਇਹਦੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਲਏਗਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਅੰਦਰੋਂ ਤਰਸ ਦਿਆ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੁਝ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਪਲੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਚੱਲਦੀਆਂ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਐਗਜ਼ੌਸਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਸ ਤਰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ, ਤੇ ਅਖੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖਾਲੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ। ਇਹ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਅਸਰ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਸਮਰਪਣਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੌਲੀ 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 ਕਰਦੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਮੀਨਿੰਗਲੈਸ ਆ, ਤੇ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਡਾਰਕਨੈਸ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਬੰਦੇ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਮੀਨਿੰਗ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਕੋਈ, ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਦਇਆ ਹੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਠੱਗ ਲਈ, ਸੀਤਾ ਦਾਨ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੋਈ ਠੱਗੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੋ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਪਰਸਪੈਕਟਿਵ ਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਧਿਰਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ, ਮੈਂ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਮੈਂ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮਾਈਨਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਸਟਰਕਚਰਸ ਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਿਊਡਲਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ, ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੋਲੋਨਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਟਰਕਚਰਸ ਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੀ ਪਛਾਣ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਖੜੋਤ ਨੂੰ ਤੋੜਦੇ ਹੋਏ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਤੋੜਦੇ ਹੋਏ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਜੋਧਕਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਸੋਸ਼ੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਬਰੀਕ ਡਿਟੇਲ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੀਤੀ। ਉਹਦੀ ਫਲੂਡਿਟੀ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਾਂਗਾ ਵੀ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਫਲੂਡਿਟੀ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਵੇਰੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਭਾਵਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਈਵੈਂਟ 'ਚ ਦਿਖਾਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਕੀ ਰੱਖਦੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹਦੀ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਲਸਫੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਮਾਈਂਡ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਹੈ। ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਚਲੋ ਮੈਂ ਹੁਣ ਸੰਖਿਆ ਸ਼ਾਸਤਰ 'ਚ ਨਾ ਜਾਵਾਂ ਜਾਂ ਔਸਪੈਂਸਕੀ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਆ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਗੈਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਡਾਟਾ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝ ਆਏਗਾ, ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਗੈਰ ਉਹ ਠੱਗਿਆ ਜਾਏਗਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਰਵ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਿਵਲ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੈਲੈਂਟ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਦਾ, ਉਹਦੀ ਐਥਿਕਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ 'ਚ ਬਣ ਰਿਹਾ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਉਹ ਅਸੈਪਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦਾ, ਉਹ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਨੌਕਰ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਚਿਰ ਸਿਵਲ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੀ ਐਥਿਕਸ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਈ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਸੈਕੂਲਰ ਵਰਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਕਾਸਮਿਕ ਫਿਨੋਮੇਨਾ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਲ ਆ, ਉਹ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਮਾਡਰਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਹਨ, ਸੈਕੂਲਰ ਲਿਬਰਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਹਨ, ਪਰ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੀਆਂ ਫਿਊਡਲਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਕੋਲੋਨਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਲਝੀ ਲੁਕਾਈ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਪਏ ਪਿਓਰ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਆ, ਉਹ ਸਿਵਲ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੀ ਐਥਿਕਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਗੈਰ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਬਗੈਰ ਉਹ ਕੋਈ ਵੱਡਾ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਸਕਣਗੇ। ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਟਰਕਚਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਹੀ ਛੋਟੀ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਸਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਨਗੇ, ਆਪਣੀ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਦਾਗੀ ਕਰਨਗੇ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬੜੀਆਂ ਮੂਵਸ ਨਿਕਲਦੀਆਂ, ਬੜੇ ਹੁਲਾਰੇ ਨਿਕਲਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਬੜਾ ਕੁਝ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਦੇਖਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਕੋਈ ਇਹਦਾ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦਾ ਬੰਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਨਾ ਹੀ ਇਕੋਨਮੀ ਦਾ ਬੰਦਾ, ਮੈਂ ਤੇ ਲਿਟਰੇਚਰ ਦਾ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਆ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਰਕਤ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਡਾਟਾ ਹੈ ਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਐਥੀਕਲ ਨਿਯਮ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਂ ਸੋਸ਼ੀਓਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਅਬਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਆ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਫਰੈਸ਼ਨੈਸ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਆਸਪੈਕਟ ਨੂੰ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਡੀਲ ਕਰਦੀ ਆ, ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਡਾਟੇ ਦੀ ਫਰੈਸ਼ਨੈਸ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਵੇਰੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਨਕਾਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ। ਨਹੀਂ ਤੇ ਸਟੈਗਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਪਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਰੋਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦਾ। ਸੋ ਸਟੈਗਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਇੱਕ ਬਾਂਝ ਰਿਐਲਿਟੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੂਜਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਪੋਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ ਐਥੀਕਲੀ, ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਬਾਗੀ ਹੁੰਦੇ। ਸੋ ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਪਛਾਣਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਟਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਟਲੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਪਰਸਪੈਕਟਿਵ ਨੂੰ ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣ ਦੇਗੀ ਉਹ ਵੇਰੀਏਸ਼ਨ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਖੜੋਤ ਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਰਿਲੇਟਿਵਲੀ ਜਸਟੀਫਾਈਬਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਡਾਟੇ ਦੀ ਫਰੈਸ਼ਨੈਸ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਗਤੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਡਾਟੇ ਦੀ ਗਤੀ ਦਾ ਫਲੋ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕੌਨਸ਼ੀਅਸਨੈਸ ਦੇ ਰੈਲਮਸ, ਉਹਦੇ ਅੰਦਰਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਰੰਟਸ ਆ, ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ। ਚਲੋ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਨਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਬੋਲਾਂ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੱਜ ਆਪਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੈਬੀਨਾਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ, ਇੱਕ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੜਾ ਹੰਬਲ ਜਿਹੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਉਦਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਡਾਟੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪਛਾਣ ਕਰੀਏ, ਠੀਕ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਰੀਏ, ਸਿਵਲ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੀ ਐਥਿਕਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮੰਨੀਏ, ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਲੋਕਲ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ ਉਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਫਿਊਡਲਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਕਲੋਨੀਅਲ ਸਟਰਕਚਰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਅਕੈਡਮੀ ਵੀ ਉਲਝੀ ਹੋਈ ਆ, ਸਾਡੇ ਸਕਾਲਰ ਵੀ ਉਲਝੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ, ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਕ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪਰਸਪੈਕਟਿਵ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਇਸਲਾਮ ਦੇ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਨੂੰ ਮੰਨਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਨਾਤਨੀ ਪਰੰਪਰਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਰੂਤੀ ਦੇ ਰੈਲਮ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਕਲੋਨੀਅਲ ਤੇ ਇਸਲਾਮਿਕ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਮਾਡਲ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਤੇ ਡੋਮੀਨੇਟ ਕਰਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਡੁਐਲਿਟੀ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰ ਬੈਠਾ ਆ, ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਹਨ ਉਹਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਦੀ ਕੰਸਟਰਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਬਲੀਫ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੀ, ਉਹਦੀ ਰੈਸ਼ਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ, ਉਹਦੀ ਐਪਿਸਟੇਮੋਲੋਜੀ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਆ। ਉਹਦੀ ਐਪਿਸਟੇਮੋਲੋਜੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਮਾਡਰਨ ਵੈਸਟਰਨ ਵਰਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਜੋ ਆਇਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਡਾਇਲੋਗ ਕਰਕੇ ਹੀ ਕੋਈ ਨਵਾਂ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਇੰਸਟੀਟਿਊਸ਼ਨਸ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ, ਉਹਦੇ ਐਪਿਸਟੇਮੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਮਾਡਲਸ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਡਾਇਲੋਗ ਤੋਂ ਅਵੋਇਡ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਇੰਪੋਜ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਸਿਰਫ ਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਇਮੋਸ਼ਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ। ਸੋ ਤੀਜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਡਾਇਲੋਗ ਬਣਦਾ ਹੈ। ਚੌਥੇ ਨੰਬਰ ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਕਾਰਪੋਰੇਟ ਘਰਾਣਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਜੋਤਗਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਡਾਇਲੋਗ ਬਣਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਡੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੁਝ ਨੂੰ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਸਥਿਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਰੱਖੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇੰਡਕਟਿਵ ਰੀਜ਼ਨਿੰਗ 'ਚ ਦੇਖੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਾਹਰ ਗਿਆ ਬੰਦਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ ਜਹਾਜ਼ ਤੇ ਪੈਰ ਰੱਖਦਾ, ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਬਲਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਰੱਖਦਾ, ਤੇ ਦੋਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਮਾਈ ਉਹਦੀ ਜੈਨੂਅਨ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਜੈਨੂਇਨ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਜੇ ਉਹਨੇ ਆਰਟਿਸਟਿਕ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਚੀਜ਼ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੋਵੇ, ਧਰਤੀ ਦਾ ਮਦਰ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਨੇ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ। ਸੋ ਭਾਈ ਵੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਤੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਦੀ ਬਾਈਨਰੀ ਬੜੀ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਟਿਵ ਬਾਈਨਰੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਲੋਅਰ ਰੈਲਬ ਤੇ ਬਾਈਨਰੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੀ ਬਿਊਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਪਿੰਡ ਵੱਸਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਪਿੰਡ ਦੀ ਇਨੋਸੈਂਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੀ ਤਲਾਸ਼ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਬੰਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਯੂਨਿਟ ਆ, ਉਹ ਕੋਈ ਬਾਈਨਰੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ। ਬਾਈਨਰੀਜ਼ ਉਹਦੇ ਲੋਅਰ ਸੈਲਫ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਜਾਗਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਬਾਡੀ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਐਸਪੈਕਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਨੀਫੈਸਟ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਆ। ਉਹ ਅੰਦਰ ਇੱਕ ਯੂਨਿਟੀ ਆ ਹਾਇਰ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਸੋ ਧਰਤੀ ਇੱਕ ਹਾਇਰ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਯੂਨਿਟੀ ਆ, ਉਹਦੀ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਕੁਦਰਤ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਰਿਗਵੇਦ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਗਿਆ, ਜਾਂ ਭਾਈ ਵੀਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਕਵਿਤਾ ਲਿਖੀ ਗਈ, ਜਾਂ ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਲਿਖੀ ਗਈ। ਸੋ ਕੁਦਰਤ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਲਵ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ, ਉਹਦਾ ਰੋਮਾਂਟਿਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਇਆ। ਸੋ ਪਿੰਡ 'ਚ ਰੋਮਾਂਟਿਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਡਿਵਰਸ਼ਨਸ ਆ। ਸੋ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ 10 ਬਰਾਦਰੀਆਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਵਾਹੀ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ, ਉਹਨਾਂ 10 ਬਰਾਦਰੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਨਾਇਕਤਵ ਮੇਕਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਸਥਾਨ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਇੰਝ ਕਿੰਝ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦਾ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਐ ਬਦੋਬਦੀ ਦਾਵਾ ਥੋੜਾ। ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਬਦੋਬਦੀ, ਸਾਡੀ ਪੀੜ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਝੰਡਾ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਖੜ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਮਗਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੋਲਿਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਧਰਾਵਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਖੜੀਆਂ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੈਪਚਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਦੇਸ਼ ਭਗਤੀ ਦੇ ਰਾਖੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ। ਉਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਰਟੀ? ਸੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਪੰਥ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਕਿੰਝ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਟਿਵ? ਪਿੰਡ ਦੀ ਇਨੋਸੈਂਸ ਦਾ ਕਿੰਝ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਟਿਵ? ਸੋ ਮਾਲਵੇ ਦੇ ਪਿੰਡਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੋਇਟਰੀ 'ਚ ਗਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਮਰਤਾ ਪ੍ਰੀਤਮ ਤੇ ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਰਾਗ ਤਰਲਤਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਪਿੰਡ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੀਤ ਗਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਪਿੰਡ ਦਾ ਗੀਤ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਿਆ। ਹੁਣ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਕਹੋਗੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ? ਤੋ ਇਹ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਸਿੰਬਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਇੰਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਦਾ, ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਐ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਦਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਧਰਤੀ ਦਾ। ਉਹਦੀ ਬੜੀ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਬੜੀਆਂ ਲੇਅਰਸ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਆ। ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਫੈਲਦੇ ਮੌਲਦੇ ਸੰਸਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਲਝਦੇ ਹੋਏ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਹਨੇਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਗੁੰਮ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਨਸ਼ੀਅਸਨੈਸ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰੈਲਮਸ ਆ ਉਹ ਐਕਸਪਲੋਰ ਕਰਨੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇੱਕ ਮੈਨ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਮੈਨ ਬੀਇੰਗ ਦਾ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਵੀ ਹੈ। ਚਲੋ ਮੈਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਨਾ ਬੋਲਾਂ। ਸੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਅਰਜ਼ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਬੜਾ ਹੰਬਲ ਜਿਹਾ ਐਫਰਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਸਿੰਸੈਰਿਟੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੋਚਣ ਦਾ ਵਿਧਾਨ ਬਣਾਈਏ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਮਾਫੀ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦਾ ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਟੈਕਨੀਕਲ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਕਮੈਂਟ ਕਰ ਸਕਾਂ, ਪਰ ਚਲੋ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜੋਤਿਕਾ ਜੀ ਦਾ, ਰੂਪਾਂਜਲੀ ਕਾਰਤਕ ਜੀ ਦਾ, ਗੁਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਤੇ ਅਮਨਦੀਪ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਲਈ ਕੋਈ ਸੋਚਣ ਦੀ ਵਿਧੀ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਅਤੇ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਕੁਝ ਨਵੀਆਂ ਸ਼ੇਡਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਲਿਆ ਸਕੇ ਹਾਂ। ਤੇ ਇਸ ਜਰਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਅੱਗੇ ਵਧਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ, ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ 2 ਮਿੰਟ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਥੱਲੇ ਧਰਾਤਲ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣਾ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਵੀ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਕੋਈ ਸਾਡਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਚੈਨਲ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਕਾਲਰਸ ਦੀ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਵੇ, ਕੋਈ ਮੈਗਜ਼ੀਨ ਹੋਵੇ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਕਰੇ ਜਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਲੋਕ ਕਰਨ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ। ਸਾਡੇ ਸਕੂਲਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਅੰਡਰਲਾਈਨ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਆ। ਜਿਵੇਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਗਿਆਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਜੌਲ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਸੁੱਚਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਗਿੱਲ ਜੀ, ਸੋ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਕੋਨੋਮਿਸਟ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ ਐ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੱਲ, ਪਰ ਇਹ ਸਕੂਲਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਚਿਰ ਇਸ ਯੁੱਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਫੀਲਡ ਦਾ ਗਿਆਨ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਉਹ ਸਟੇਟ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਲੇ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ। ਸੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਸ਼ੇ ਦਾ ਗਿਆਨ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕਰਨਾ ਉਸ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਪਾਰਟ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੀ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਦੇਣੀ, ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਮੀਡੀਵੀਅਲ ਟਰਾਈਬਲ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ। ਕੋਈ ਐ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਵੀ ਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦਾ ਬਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਉਹਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਛੋਟੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਜੇ ਕਹਿ ਦੇਵਾਂ ਤੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦਾ ਬੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ, ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਜਿੰਨੀ ਪੋਇਟਰੀ ਆਈ, ਜੋ ਨਾਵਲ ਆਏ ਤੇ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਪੜ੍ਹਦਾ ਰਿਹਾ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਜੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਪਸਾਰ ਪਏ ਹੋਏ ਸੀ ਇਸ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਹੋਰ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦਿਸਦੇ ਹੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਿਲਡ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਨਰਜੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਗਲਤ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਇਮੈਜੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਨਾਨ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਟ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਆ। ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੰਗੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਇਮੈਜਿਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਦਾ ਤੂਫਾਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਾਲ ਵਗਿਆ। ਉਹ ਉਸ ਰਿਐਲਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਕੰਸਨਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ, ਉਹਦੇ ਐਨਾਲਿਸਿਸ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੂਰਾ ਉਤਰਨ ਦਾ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਪੋਇਟਸ ਦਾ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹ ਉਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ। ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਬਦਲ ਵੀ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਟ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟਸ ਚੱਲਦੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ, ਇੱਕ ਨਾਨ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਟ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਉੱਠੀ ਆ। ਤੇ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਟ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਧਿਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਡਰ ਵੀ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਨਾਨ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਸਾਬਤ ਨਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਏ। ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੈਨਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਲਗਾਤਾਰ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਕਾਲਰਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਸੁਣਨ ਵਾਲੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਿੰਘੂ ਬਾਰਡਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਹੀ ਮੌਤ ਦੀ ਖੇਡ ਤੇ ਖੂਨ ਦੀ ਖੇਡ ਦੇ ਨਕਸ਼ੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਲੀਕਾਂ ਵਾਹ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਾਗਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ। ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਵੀ ਸਟੱਡੀ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਕਿਸੇ ਇੱਕ ਈਵੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਦਿਸ਼ਾਵਾਂ ਜਾਗ ਪੈਂਦੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਵਰਸ਼ਨ ਦਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਮਨ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ। ਤੇ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਕਮਾਲ ਦੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਹੁਣ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਮੈਂ ਟੋਲਸਟੋਏ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦਾ ਮਾਡਲ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਵੜ ਗਿਆ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਆਜ਼ਾਦ ਰੂਪ 'ਚ ਚੱਲਣ ਲੱਗ ਪੈਂਦੀਆਂ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਭੁਗਤ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਕੰਟੈਕਸਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ। ਸੋ ਕਈ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਆ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਦੇ ਹੱਕ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਭੁਗਤ ਗਈਆਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚੋਂ ਹੋਰ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਵੈਲਪ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਆਈਡੀਅਲ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਸੀਗਾ। ਸੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਬਹੁਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਚਲੋ ਬਹੁਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਕਾਫੀ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਨਾਨ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਟ ਮੂਵਮੈਂਟ ਆਈ ਆ ਵੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਗਲੋਰੀਫਾਈ ਕਰਨਾ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਗਲਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ, ਪਰ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਉਸ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਐਕਸਪਲੋਰ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਰੋਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗਾ, ਨਾ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੰਸਨਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਤੇ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫਿਜ਼ੀਕਲ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਵਾਪਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਠੀਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਾਂਗੇ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਦੇ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਆਸਪੈਕਟ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਵਾਪਰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਵਰਤਾਰੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਫਰਾਇਡ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਟਰੁੱਥ 'ਚੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੱਢਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ, ਨਿਤਸ਼ੇ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਆਸਪੈਕਟ ਨੂੰ ਟਰੁੱਥ ਮੇਕਿੰਗ 'ਚੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੱਢਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਵੇਰੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਟਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਟ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇੱਕ ਬੜਾ ਹੰਬਲ ਜਿਹਾ ਐਫਰਟ ਸੀ। ਮੈਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ, ਮੈਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਅਣਜਾਣ ਬੰਦਾ, ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਕਦਰ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਇਹ ਉਮੀਦ ਕਰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਐਕਸਰਸਾਈਜ਼ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੀ ਚੱਲੇਗੀ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।
Thank you, Professor Jagdish Singh, for your plumbing temporal and meta-temporal analysis of the undercurrents of Punjab's agriculture and society, and for providing thought-provoking opportunities and insights in your presiding remarks. The intent behind Naad Pargaas USA conducting this webinar was to respectfully and sympathetically provide a venue to elicit multiple perspectives on Punjab agriculture so as to give inputs to the formulation of a balanced future paradigm of Punjab's agriculture. Our intent was also to make an appeal to formulate an intellectual methodology that can govern the future incarnations of Punjab's agriculture so that it remains forever hinged in the bedrock of sustainability. At this point, we are moving towards bringing this webinar to a close. On behalf of Naad Pargaas USA, I'd like to deeply thank our esteemed speakers of today, Professor Jagdish Singh, Dr. Surinder Singh Jodhka, Dr. Rupanjali Karthik, Gurpreet Singh, Amandeep Singh, for their time and efforts and contributions to help build a holistic perspective on the current and future state of Punjab's agriculture. Secondly, I'd like to make a couple announcements with regards to Naad Pargaas's in-progress and planned activities. Naad Pargaas believes that there is a great untapped potential in the domain of Sikh studies and research. Incidentally, there is a limited opportunity to manifest such research, as there is a paucity of avenues in which the researchers associated with the field of Sikh studies can seek careers. Naad Pargaas acknowledges this chasm and the fact that Sikh studies and research behoove attention and encouragement. To foster such research, Naad Pargaas USA has sponsored scholarship to Sikh students who are undertaking methodology-driven detailed research on important topics of Sikh studies, and to come back and articulate the voice of Sikh experience in those papers. The research is in progress, and the outcome will be shared with the community in the Q4 2023 to Q1 2024 timeframe. Naad Pargaas launched Ik Penda. It's a poetic work authored by Tejinder Singh that blends imaginative and creative thought with experiential reality. The work also takes a leap of faith into territories that dwell in human wonder and divine substance. This book was recently released by Naad Pargaas at Punjab University, Chandigarh, and is evoking interest in Punjab's literary circles. Naad Pargaas USA is planning to release this work in the United States and will communicate its plans going forward. In addition, there is work in progress on 2 seminal works, and details of book releases of those works will also be furnished in the future.